Hello everyone, welcome to Paranormal M. I'm glad you're here for another video. Before we get into the stories, if you enjoy this video, please give it a like. And if you have any strange or unexplained experience of your own, feel free to send it to me. The first story tonight comes from someone who says this happened when they were very young. It started like a normal night, but what they saw in the room and near the living room is something they still think about today. Let's start with that story, and I hope you all sleep well tonight. Hi, I want to tell you about something that happened to me when I was little. And even now, every time I say it out loud, I get chills. I was around 7 years old at the time. I'm not completely sure of my exact age, but I know I was still very young, definitely under 10. Back then, I slept in the same bed as my mom and my older sister. My mom would sleep on the outside edge, and I would be tucked in the middle. If I woke up at night needing to use the bathroom, I always asked my mom to go with me. The bathroom wasn't far at all, just down the hall from our bedroom, but it was something I was used to doing. I also can't remember clearly whether this happened before or after my grandfather passed away. I only mention that because, for years, part of me wondered if one of the figures I saw could have been him. But honestly, that never fully made sense, because the figure was much taller than he ever was. That night started normally. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night. It was dark outside, and I remember hearing dogs barking somewhere nearby. I needed to pee, so I tried to wake my mom. Usually, she woke up right away. But this time, she didn't move. She was in this deep, heavy sleep. I tried waking my sister too, but she didn't wake up either. The strange thing is, I don't remember feeling scared yet. I wasn't really afraid of the dark. I just wanted someone to walk with me because that was my habit. So I started climbing down from the bed by myself. And I want you to picture this clearly. I was a little girl, sort of scooting backward off the mattress, facing the bed while my feet searched for the floor. That's when I saw her. Between my mom's legs, near the edge of the bed, there was a woman's head. Just a head. It was upside down, and she was smiling at me. Her hair was incredibly long. It stretched across the floor, all the way toward the bedroom door. When I think back now, the whole room feels strange in my memory, almost hazy, like the air had gone thick and quiet. And what bothers me most is that I still don't remember being afraid. Not the way I should have been. I just looked at her hair on the floor as I moved toward the door. When I opened it, I could see straight into the living room. There were a few steps leading down into it, and standing there was a tall, black figure. It was so tall its head nearly touched the ceiling. I couldn't see a face. I couldn't see clothes. I couldn't even tell where it was looking exactly. It was just completely dark, like a human-shaped shadow with an outline. But I knew it was facing me. Something in me stopped. I don't know if it was instinct or fear finally catching up, but I didn't go any farther. I held my pee that night. I think I just turned around, got back into bed, and somehow went back to sleep. And that's all I remember. But even now, I keep wondering what would have happened if I had walked toward it. What if I had been curious instead of cautious? What if I hadn't listened to that feeling telling me not to go into the living room? And I still don't understand the woman's head. Why was she there? Why was she smiling? And why wasn't I scared? Before I get into what happened, I feel like I should say this first. Strange things have happened around me before. Nothing dramatic, nothing movie level, but enough that I've learned not to immediately brush things off. When I was younger, in the house I grew up in, we'd sometimes hear footsteps when nobody was walking around. At my aunt's place, I heard someone call my name from the hallway when I was completely alone. That happened more than once. And there was this one thing I still think about. this weird scraping sound under my bed, almost like something was scratching at the carpet from underneath. We checked for mice, rats, anything like that, and there was nothing. Even now, I tell myself maybe it was a possum in the walls or something, because that feels easier to accept. My aunt has had her own strange experiences too, so I know I'm not the only one in the family who's noticed things like this. Anyway, this happened on a Sunday morning. My dad usually works really early, so most days he leaves around 5:30 or 6 in the morning, and he's always quiet about it. I normally don't wake up until around 8 or 9 if I'm not working. But that morning, he left a bit later, around 7:30, because he was heading out with a couple of his friends for the day. So by about 8, it was just me and my cat, Tobin, at home. I got up, fed him, and then went back to bed for a little while before properly starting my day. You know those mornings where you're awake, but you're not exactly ready to be a functioning person yet? That was me. I was lying there scrolling on my phone, and Tobin was beside me, curled up and half asleep, completely unbothered. The house was quiet. My bedroom is at the back of the house, at the end of this slightly awkward hallway. I usually leave my door cracked open so Tobin can come and go, because honestly, I do not have the patience to keep getting up every time he changes his mind. And when you're home alone, you hear everything. Every creak, every little shift, every normal house noise. Nothing felt unusual. Then, around 8:30, I heard one of the kitchen stools drag across the tiles. It wasn't a tiny sound either. It was that very specific scraping noise a stool makes when someone pulls it out or pushes it sideways. And these stools aren't flimsy. My dad brought them home from his work a while ago. They're older, but they're sturdy, not wobbly, and definitely not light enough to just slide around by themselves. The second it happened, Tobin shot up. He went completely still, ears forward, body tense, staring toward the hallway like he'd heard exactly what I heard. And I know cats can be strange. He stares at corners sometimes, or reacts to noises I can't hear, and usually I just tell myself that's normal cat behavior. But this felt different. He wasn't curious. He looked defensive. I do believe animals and little kids can pick up on things adults don't always notice. I also believe ghosts are real, although I don't think they show up the way movies make it seem. So, because apparently I have the survival instincts of someone in the first 10 minutes of a horror film, I got up and went to check. And the stool was moved. It was sitting in the walkway between the kitchen and the living area. That was not where it had been earlier when I fed Tobin. I knew it wasn't. It had been tucked in like usual, and now it was out in the open, like someone had pulled it across the floor and just left it there. At first, I felt unsettled. Then I started trying to explain it away, because that's what you do, right? You look for the normal answer first. But I couldn't find one. The front door was locked. The handle lock was locked, and the deadbolt was locked too. I would have heard it if someone came in. The back door was locked as well. My dad uses the garage key when he comes and goes, and there was no sign that anyone had entered. The windows don't open in a way someone could climb through. There were no drafts. Nothing had fallen against it. There were no signs of an intruder, no footsteps, no voices, no movement. Just that sound. And then the stool, sitting somewhere it absolutely had not been. I even took photos from a video I sent my aunt because I needed someone else to see what I was looking at. There was a bag on one of the chairs too, my dad's lunch bag from the night before, and that hadn't moved at all. Only the stool. I still don't know what happened. I keep trying to make it make sense, but I can't. All I know is that I heard it move. My cat reacted instantly, and when I went out there, it was sitting right in the walkway, like someone, or something, had dragged it there. I want to share something personal with you, and honestly, I'm not even sure what I'm expecting. Maybe I just want to hear from people who have felt something similar, because this has stayed with me for years. A few years ago, I had moved to a new city, and I was still trying to settle into that life. Around that time, someone I knew was admitted to a psychiatric care facility, so I went to visit him for a few days. His family was also going through something very painful, and one of his relatives had recently tried to take their own life. Being around so much emotional suffering affected me more than I expected. Every time I came back to my rented room, I felt heavy inside. It was like I had carried the sadness back with me, even though I didn't fully understand it. During that same period, I was attending energy healing sessions. In one session, the healer suddenly stopped and asked me, "Do you feel someone standing there?" I opened my eyes and looked around, but I didn't see anything. I told her no. Then she said she had seen what looked like a male shadow standing near me, very still, almost as if it was facing me. She said she could even see its outline against the wall behind me. I didn't see anything myself, but hearing that frightened me deeply. I couldn't stay calmly in that room after that. I left the place for a couple of days because I felt too unsettled. When I came back, I brought pictures of God and kept them in my room. I started chanting mantras regularly, mostly because I wanted to feel protected and grounded. Since then, I've had experiences that I don't really know how to interpret. I sometimes dream about family members who have passed away, pets I've lost, and even gods or goddesses. I'm not saying every dream is a sign, but some of them feel different. They stay with me after I wake up. Whenever people talk about spirits, energy, or the unseen world, I feel instantly curious. It's not only fear. Sometimes it feels like a pull, like some part of me wants to understand something deeper. Over the years, I've explored different spiritual practices. I learned tarot for a while, though I never used it professionally or tried to make money from it. I studied numerology, manifestation, and a few other spiritual subjects. I read a lot about these things, and I'm naturally drawn to shows and movies with spiritual themes. But the strange part is, my regular life is completely different. I work in tech. That's my career, and that's how I support myself. Still, deep down, I sometimes feel like my life is not supposed to be only about work, deadlines, and screens. I've even stayed at spiritual places a couple of times for a few days, just to see what that kind of life feels like. And every time I do something like that, I feel peaceful, but also confused. The biggest problem is consistency. I'll start learning one spiritual path and become very interested in it. For a few months, I'll feel completely connected to it. Then slowly, I lose that focus and get attracted to something else. Tarot, numerology, meditation, healing, manifestation, dreams, signs. It keeps changing. It feels like spirituality keeps calling me, but I don't know what exactly it wants from me. I'm not claiming I've seen ghosts. I'm not saying I've had some clear supernatural experience. I genuinely don't know what to believe. I don't know whether the shadow the healer saw was real, whether my dreams have meaning, or whether I'm simply sensitive to these subjects because of what I went through emotionally. But I do feel that something inside me keeps searching. So I'm asking honestly, has anyone else experienced this kind of pull toward spirituality without knowing where it leads? How did you find your path without getting lost in too many practices? And how do you understand the difference between a real spiritual calling and your own mind trying to make sense of difficult experiences? Okay, so I'm a mom of 3. I have 2 girls and 1 little boy, ages 6, 4, and 1. And before all of this started happening with me and the kids, my husband had already grown up around strange things. His whole family has, honestly. They just kind of treat it like background noise now. Radios turning on by themselves, toys making sounds in the middle of the night, his little brother waking up because something told him to go downstairs and play. rocks from the river somehow making a little path toward the door. One time my mother-in-law heard voices answer, "We're fine," when she asked if her baby was okay. So, the normal family stuff apparently. But when my husband moved in with me, it slowed down. Not completely, but it became less and less. The first place we lived together was this little pale yellow house. I was pregnant there, and after I had my first daughter, I started waking up in the middle of the night to something running across the ceiling. And I mean running. Back and forth, fast, like heavy feet. My dogs outside would go wild, barking and running under the same spot. So of course we checked the roof, thinking maybe it was a cat or a raccoon or something. But there were no footprints, no signs of anything. And the house was one of those poorly built prefab homes, so there was no way a person could have been up there without coming through the ceiling. After I delivered my daughter, I also started seeing this fog in the room. Not like smoke exactly, more like a little cloud that would drift in and disappear. That happened for a while, then slowly faded. Before my oldest turned 1, we moved into another house. It had 2 floors, and that place felt different right away. When you were downstairs, it sounded like someone was upstairs. When you were upstairs, it felt like someone was watching from outside. Once my daughter started sleeping in her own room, she would wake up and tell us there was someone under her bed. She said they woke her up, and she would tell them, "I need to sleep. Leave me alone." But she said they would tell her no. That house, she called the red house. And in the red house, whatever it was started bothering her more and more. Eventually, we had to move her back into our room. I would catch her talking to someone, but when I asked who she was talking to, she would deny it immediately. It was almost like someone had told her not to say anything. Later, we moved again, this time into an apartment with my 2 girls. My in-laws had lived there before us, and even before we moved in, my oldest would say there was a man there. She described him as very tall, almost up to the ceiling, all black like a shadow, and old. She said he stayed in the corner and watched people. She would point right at the spot and say, "He's there." She also said he lived, or hid, inside her grandparents' closet. There was also this smell in the apartment. Tobacco, but not cigarettes. More like old cigar smoke, thick and stale. It would come out of nowhere, then disappear. When we moved in, I cleaned the apartment physically and spiritually. And for a while, it felt good. No smell, no strange sounds, nothing. Then after some time, the smell came back a little. Then the noises started again. So I cleaned again, and everything calmed down. But now, recently, my second daughter Lily, who's 4, has started waking up at night. She comes crying into my room saying she's scared, then falls back asleep. I have a camera in the living room, one of those that turns toward movement. So I checked the footage to see what was going on. She usually wakes up between midnight and 3:30 in the morning. At first, it looks like she's just going to the bathroom. But when I really watched the videos, it seemed like something was waking her up. Every time, it's almost the same. She opens her bedroom door, sticks her head out, and looks around like she's searching for someone. Then she goes to the bathroom and closes the door. When she comes out, she looks around again, like she's checking if someone is there. She doesn't turn off the bathroom light, even though it's right across from her room. Then she goes back to bed, leaves her door open, and tries to sleep. Sometimes she does this more than once. I've asked her, "Lily, what's going on? Why do you keep waking up?" And she always says little things like, "I'm scared," or "It's the monster." She says, "The corner is scary. The monster is there." And "It's big." That's what gets me, because it sounds so much like what my oldest used to say. Lily doesn't explain as much, but when I connect the pieces, it's the same thing. Tall, scary, in the corner. My youngest is different. He doesn't scare as easily. Whatever this is doesn't seem to wake him up. It calls him. He'll point at the ceiling and try to get us to look, but there's nothing there. My husband tells him, "Tell it to go away. Fight it." So he does. He'll throw toys up in the air and say, "No, no, no," and then squat down like he's arguing with someone we can't see. Honestly, nobody bothers him much anymore. There was one night close to Christmas that really stayed with me. I woke up around 3 in the morning, facing the bedroom door, and I saw blue light coming from the living room. At first I thought, great, we left the TV on. I was about to get up and turn it off, but then this fear came over me. Not normal fear, not, "It's dark and I'm sleepy" fear. It was deep, cold fear. Like something in the living room did not want me there. So I did what any brave adult would do. I got back into bed and stared at the door. The TV lights kept changing, like someone was scrolling through something or watching something. The next morning, I still couldn't believe how scared I had been, so I checked the camera. At 3 a.m., the TV turned on by itself. At 3:10, it started playing a movie. At 3:30, it switched to pictures of us. At 3:40, it turned off. I was shocked. Whatever this thing is, it watches TV and doesn't even help with the bills. At least fold some laundry while you're haunting the place. But then I looked at the video frame by frame, and that's when I saw it. There were 2 orbs moving really fast across the room. Not dust, they moved with purpose. Then there was this pale shadow, almost white, rising up between the TV and the Christmas tree. Then it vanished, and the TV turned off. That was the moment I felt sick, because it wasn't just weird anymore. It was in the same home where my kids were scared. I honestly don't know what else to do. I cleanse the house. I pray. I cover the mirrors in my girls' room at night. I try to protect them in every way I know how, but something still keeps waking Lily up, and I can feel it. I don't know if it's a person, a presence, or something else, but I feel that something is there. And the part that worries me most is that it's bothering my children. I keep thinking that if I don't stop it, or at least protect them better, it's going to become stronger, more noticeable, maybe even dangerous. So that's where I am right now. I'm trying to stay calm. I'm trying to be brave for them. But deep down, I feel like my protection isn't enough, and I need to figure out what to do before this goes any further. Hey, I want to share something with you. Something that happened to me about 20 years ago that really shook me, even though I'm usually the most skeptical person around. I don't have any blurry video or proof, and honestly, I'm not someone who easily believes in paranormal stuff. But this experience was so real, so vivid. It left a mark on me that I can't just brush off. Back then, I was living in rural Wales, in this tiny little village. One of those places so small you might only recognize it if you'd seen the detective show Hinterland, because they shot the hotel from the first episode right near there. My best mate, let's call him Mark, lived in the next village over. There were 2 ways to get between our houses: the long road, which was about an hour-and-a-half walk, and this shortcut through the forest that took maybe half an hour if you knew the way. The shortcut went over this old place called Miner's Bridge. The bridge itself had a story. It was built over a ravine carved out by a fast-moving stream, and it stood where an even older bridge had been, one that miners used to cross when they were heading to collect their weekly wages. The path down to the bridge was this narrow gravel switchback, winding steeply down the ravine's side, with thick trees crowding in so tight that sunlight barely touched the forest floor, especially as dusk crept in. I used to take that path a lot after hanging with Mark. It saved me an hour of walking, and even though it was dark and sometimes downright scary, sometimes I couldn't even see my hand in front of my face when the moon was thin. I'd rather stumble through the woods than trudge the long road. One summer night, Mark and I were hanging out, drinking tea that was way too sweet and smoking thin roll-ups, wishing we had money for booze or weed, which we didn't. It was pushing 2 a.m. when I decided it was time to head home. The summer was fading, but the air was still warm, and the moon was nearly full, so I thought, okay, I probably won't get lost tonight. I started down the gravel path, feeling the loose stones crunch beneath my boots, hearing the soft shifting of the earth as I carefully made my way. The world was bathed in pale moonlight, the trees casting long shadows, and the only other sound was the water rushing far below in the ravine, chuckling and gurgling as it tumbled over rocks. It was a peaceful, almost hypnotic noise, but that night it felt different. When I got halfway across Miner's Bridge, the hairs on the back of my neck suddenly stood up. Everything around me seemed to shift in the most unsettling way. The quiet was too quiet. The water was still there, but the atmosphere had changed. I stopped, my breath catching in my throat, and slowly turned to look back toward the path I'd come. And there it was. Standing at the far end of the bridge, where the path met the forest, was something not quite human. It was huge, at least 3 feet taller than I am, standing perfectly still. I swear it was staring right at me. I want to tell you I could make out its face, but I couldn't. It was just this dark, towering figure, its form blotting out the moonlight behind it. The gravel path was narrow and noisy underfoot, but this thing hadn't made a sound. It was like it was gliding. Or maybe it was just incredibly heavy-footed but somehow silent. What really unnerved me was the sense it gave off. A hatred so intense it felt almost like a physical force pressing down on me. I could see its limbs, twisted and bent in ways that looked wrong, as if they'd been broken and reset incorrectly, giving it this grotesque, unnatural posture. My heart pounded so loud I thought it might burst out of my chest. I stood there frozen, caught between fear and disbelief for what felt like an eternity, but was probably just 30 seconds. Then, the fight-or-flight instinct kicked in, and I ran. I ran faster than I ever have, leaving the bridge and that thing behind me, the sound of my feet pounding the path and the rush of the stream below the only noises in the night. After that night, I didn't go anywhere near Miner's Bridge again. I even slept with the light on for a full week, just to shake off the feeling of being watched. I still don't know what I saw. I'm skeptical, sure, but there's no rational explanation for that figure or the way it made me feel. Since then, I haven't dismissed everything so quickly. Sometimes, there are things out there that don't fit into neat little boxes. Have you ever experienced something like that? Something that shook you to your core, even if you didn't quite understand it. Because honestly, that night changed the way I see the world. Hey, I want to share a story with you. Something that happened to me a while back, and honestly, it still gives me chills to think about it. So, picture this. I was 26 years old, living in a neighborhood just outside Las Vegas with my then husband Mark and our little boy, who was about 4 years old at the time. Life was pretty routine for us. Mark had a demanding job and left the house early every morning around 5:30 a.m., getting back around 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. I was a stay-at-home mom, so my days revolved around our son and the little routines we carved out. One thing we did almost every evening was after Mark got home, I'd take our son Jame and head over to the grocery store to grab dinner ingredients. It was a small trip, really, but it gave Mark some time to unwind alone. The grocery store we used was Smith's, and it was literally just a 2-minute drive from our house. It was one of those grocery stores with gas pumps right in the parking lot, which was super convenient. Usually, once a week, I'd fill up the car while Jame napped in the back seat. So, on one of those typical evenings, I pulled into the gas station, started pumping gas, and noticed a truck pull up at the pump right across from me. The guy was quick about whatever he was doing, filling up, maybe grabbing something from the store, and then he pulled away. But just as I was finishing pumping and walking around to close my car, that same truck pulled up alongside me. The driver rolled down his window and said something that made my skin crawl. He said, "I just needed to tell you the only reason I pulled up here was to get closer to you. I saw you and just had to tell you how beautiful you are." Now, this guy looked, well, like Ted Bundy on some kind of crazy drug. There was something off about him, the way he looked at me, like he was possessed by some dark obsession. I tried to be polite, you know? I smiled and said, "Thank you, but I'm happily married and have a son." I hoped that would be enough to send him on his way. But then, his expression twisted, and he said, "I know. I just had to let you know how I felt." He started to pull away, but then stopped, backed up a little, rolled down his window again, and hissed, "By the way, if you tell your husband what I said, I'll kill him." And with that, he sped off into the night. I was stunned. My heart was pounding so hard I thought Mark would hear it through the phone when I called him immediately after getting into the car. I told him everything. The truck, the threat, how scared I was. He told me not to drive home, just in case the guy was following me. Instead, he said, I should drive to the nearest police station, run the first red light I hit, and if I got pulled over, explain the situation to the officer. So that's exactly what I did. I was shaking the whole way, but when the officer pulled me over, he was incredibly understanding. He even drove me and Jame home himself, while Mark went to pick up the car the next day. I thought maybe that was the end of it, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Later, I told Mark how unnerving it was that the guy seemed so sure of himself when he threatened us. The way he said, "I know," when I told him I was married. Did that mean he already knew where we lived? Had he been watching me for days, maybe weeks, before approaching me that night? A few nights later, Mark realized we were out of cigarettes, so he decided to run to the store real quick. It was late, and Jame was sound asleep in his bed. I was sitting at the computer, just scrolling through some emails, when I heard the laundry room door open and close quietly. I thought it was Mark coming back for something. I called out, "Honey, what did you forget?" But there was no answer. I heard footsteps and some shuffling noises, but no response. My stomach twisted into knots. "Honey, is that you? You're freaking me out," I called again, my voice trembling now. Still, nothing. I realized I was completely alone and unarmed. Mark, being a Marine and a federal employee, had all sorts of guns in the house, but they were locked away in our bedroom closet on the top shelf. To get to them, I'd have to pass through the laundry room, right where this intruder was. I felt frozen, helpless. My heart was pounding in my throat, and my breath came in short gasps as I waited for whoever it was to come around the corner. Jame was just down the hall, sleeping peacefully, and I knew I'd do anything to keep him safe. I imagined this man controlling me, threatening my family, and I felt utterly vulnerable. Then, out of nowhere, I heard the deep, menacing growl of our two pit bulls, Ruby and Darlene, coming from my bedroom. Before I could even think, both dogs burst into the laundry room, barking fiercely. At the same moment, the garage door slammed open and shut loudly, and a man screamed. I jumped up from the computer, phone in hand, and rushed to Jame's room. I locked the door, sat down against it, and called Mark frantically. "Please tell me you're home and messing with the dogs," I begged. But in the background, I could hear the cashier at the store ringing up the cigarettes. Mark wasn't home. The man in the house was definitely not him. "Someone's in the house," I told Mark, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fear. "Get home right now, please be careful. I don't know where he is, but I think he's in the garage. I'm hiding in Jame's room with the door locked." Mark told me to stay put and wait for him. Those moments waiting in the dark, listening to every creak and whisper, felt like an eternity. When Mark finally arrived, I was so relieved I could hardly speak. After that night, Mark never left us alone after dark. The fear lingered in the air like a thick fog. About a year later, we moved to a new home, trying to leave that nightmare behind. I often think about what would have happened if Ruby and Darlene hadn't come to my rescue that night. I don't know what the man had planned, but it certainly wasn't good. Jame would have been used to control me, and Mark would have been an obstacle to get rid of. I have no doubt that our dog saved all our lives. Now, even though Ruby and Darlene have passed on from old age, and Mark and I are no longer together, Jame and I still sleep with dogs in our rooms. That night changed us forever, and their fierce protection is something I'll never forget. Hey there. I want to share a really strange experience that happened to my husband. Well, I was there too, but mostly I was just a witness. I'll do my best to tell his part of the story the way he described it to me. But first, let me set the scene from my perspective. So, back in 2018, we were living in this cozy little one-bedroom apartment in Tucson, Arizona. It was just the two of us, our 12-year-old pit bull named Bruno, and our Siamese kitten, Simon. Our bedroom was right across the hall from the bathroom, with the bedroom door facing the bathroom door directly. When I was lying in bed watching TV at night, if the bedroom door was open, I could see right into the bathroom door. One night, I was just lying there, flipping through channels, when I started hearing Simon meowing and yowling like crazy right outside the bathroom door. He was clawing frantically at the door, like he was desperate to get in. I was getting a little annoyed because it was pretty late, so I yelled at him to settle down. A few moments later, my husband came out of the bathroom looking pale as a ghost. He was holding his bath towel, but it was burnt, like seriously charred. What was really weird is that even though our apartment walls are paper thin, I usually hear the water running in the bathroom from bed. But that night, it was eerily silent. And that didn't add up with what he told me. He said he didn't hear Simon or me yelling at him at all. Instead, he said the only thing he heard was this strange noise. It was like a train barreling toward him, mixed with an old woman moaning. It was so bizarre and unsettling. Then he said he pulled back the shower curtain to check what was making the noise, and to his horror, the towel hanging on the rack was suddenly on fire. Can you imagine? A towel just bursting into flames in a steamy, damp bathroom. He was terrified and panicked, jumping out of the shower and frantically slapping at the towel to put out the fire. But here's the really weird part. As he tried to smother the flames from top to bottom, the fire seemed to move down the towel. When he put out the bottom, the top would flare back up again, and vice versa. The flames weren't the usual orange and red. They were mostly blue, and strangely, they didn't feel hot at all. It was like the fire had a mind of its own. Finally, after what felt like forever, he managed to fully extinguish the flames. Then he grabbed the towel and came out to show me. Honestly, if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I might have questioned his sanity. But I saw the towel, I touched it, and I even smelled it. It was this thick, oversized, dark gray towel. Right down the center, there were 2 burn marks shaped kind of like hockey sticks. There's really no better way to describe them. But here's the kicker. Even though the towel had obvious burn marks, that part of it didn't feel burnt at all, and it didn't even smell like smoke or fire. I took a picture of the towel because I knew no one would believe us. But we didn't keep the towel around. We got rid of it as soon as we could. I wish I still had that photo, but last year I lost my phone with all the pictures on it, and I haven't been able to find a copy anywhere. Since then, we've had a bunch of other weird paranormal experiences, but nothing quite as unsettling as the self-burning towel. It still freaks us out when we think about it. I keep asking myself, what on earth happened that night? Was it spontaneous combustion? Some kind of paranormal activity? We don't have any answers, but it's a story that stayed with us, a reminder that sometimes the unexplained can walk right into your home, even in the most ordinary moments. Hey, I want to share something with you. Something that's been on my mind ever since that trip to the woods with my girlfriend, Lila. We've been together for about 2 years now. She's a city girl, through and through. But when I told her I wanted to go up to the camp this year, she was actually excited to come along. We missed going last year, so this trip meant a lot to both of us. So, we packed up my old truck with clothes, food, and all the little necessities. The drive is about 4 hours total. The first hour and a half is mostly highway until you hit Shawhegan, or as some folks jokingly call it, Vegas. After that, you're driving through these tiny towns that feel like they're stuck in time, falling apart a little with every mile you pass. The further you get from the paper mill, the worse these towns look. But strangely, the air smells better. Because honestly, near that paper mill, it smells like a wet skug fart. Not the best welcome. Eventually, you climb up into the mountains, and the views are breathtaking. Sometimes a slow driver will let you admire the scenery while you're stuck behind them on the narrow roads. Then you reach a place called the Forks. It's a tiny spot with Barry's General Store, a few whitewater rafting companies, and not much else. We got there just as twilight was slipping away, so everything was quiet and empty. The kind of quiet that feels both peaceful and a little eerie. From the Forks, you turn right, drive down to the dam at the far end of the lake, and then take a left onto the logging roads. These roads are rough and narrow, so you have to go slow. I remember one year almost kissing a young moose that jumped right beside my truck, its nose almost poking through my open window. Those woods are dense, so thick you can barely see past the first row of trees, especially at night. I've had some strange experiences out there over the years. Once I heard a blood-curdling scream in the dead of night, like a girl getting murdered. The next morning, I found a half-eaten rabbit floating in the lake. That was reassuring in a weird way because a rabbit's scream can sound eerily like a small child's. I've also heard singing in the woods, beautiful and mournful, in a language I couldn't understand. But that's a story for another time. Back to this trip. We were driving down those logging roads, night wrapping around us like a thick blanket. I was quietly laughing to myself because Lila was gripping my arm tightly, her eyes wide with that mix of fear and excitement. Every now and then she'd punch my leg softly when I didn't stifle my laughter. I can't blame her. She'd never been in woods like these before. Then again, she was the reason we started so late, so it was kind of her fault we were driving in the dark. As we got closer to the lake, the trails narrowed and grew more overgrown. Birch trees, bent low from years of snow and wind, scraped their branches over the truck, sometimes blocking my view entirely. There's always some maintenance to do on these roads. I'm used to my eyes playing tricks on me, so when I saw shadows darting around us, I told myself it was just the light bouncing off the bumps in the road. But Lila? She wasn't so sure. She'd gasp and whisper, "What the hell is that?" as those shadows danced around us. Eventually, I had her rest her head in my lap. I played with her hair, trying to soothe her as I drove, constantly reminding myself that those shapes were just trees and shadows. I'd been down these roads before in the dark. I knew what to expect. We got to camp okay. I let Lila lift her head and pulled her close, wrapping my arms around her to comfort her before we stepped out. I told her nothing weird ever happens up here. It was a lie, but I needed her to feel safe enough to get out of the truck. I grabbed my flashlight, opened her door, and helped her with her bag as we walked to the camp. I started the generator, turned on the lights, and sat her down in the comfy chair, handing her a book while I unloaded the rest of the stuff. We settled in, and I cooked dinner while she read. Inside the camp, she was calmer, though she insisted I close the blinds on the big sliding doors at the front. During the day, the view of the lake is stunning. But at night, there's this lingering fear that if you look out, you might see something standing on the porch, watching in. I was going to close the blinds anyway. We ate, enjoyed our privacy, and went to bed. We stayed for a few days. There was nothing urgent to do. We read, swam, kayaked to the islands, and, well, enjoyed each other's company. I tried to convince Lila to be naked since we were alone, but no luck. I brought a tent because I wanted to spend a night out in the woods. It was a hard sell at first, but after a couple of calm, firelit nights without anything strange happening, she agreed, on one condition. I bring my shotgun. Fair enough. I've never encountered bears or wolves up there, and we didn't hear any howling, but I wasn't going unarmed. On our third or fourth night, we ventured out. Not far, just staying in sight of the big tree by camp. We couldn't see the camp or hear the lake, but we found a nice flat spot in a small clearing where I pitched the tent. You can guess how we spent the rest of the night. Hot dogs, s'mores by the fire, then out like lights. Lila fell asleep quickly, but I didn't. I was in and out of sleep, caught between worlds. At one point, I felt her get up. I saw a muted light from her hand holding a flashlight, but I couldn't react. Maybe I dreamed it. She went outside and came back quietly, light off, then lay down again. Still, I wasn't sure if it was real. Then I woke fully to her voice outside the tent, whispering, desperate and terrified. "You need to get out of there. That's not me. Get out. We need to get back inside the camp." My blood ran cold. I sat up, reaching for my shotgun, but she wrapped her hands around me, pulling me back down, whispering, "Where are you going?" I froze. I let her pull me down as my mind spun. My thoughts were shattered, tumbling like broken glass in a dryer. I said nothing, just lay there, listening. Lila's hands rested lightly on my chest, and soon she seemed to fall asleep again. I strained to hear anything beyond her breathing. Nothing. I had to convince myself it was a dream, but before I could sleep, I tried to get up again. She pulled me down again, then kissed me, fiercely. That night, she didn't wear pajamas, she usually did, but now she was dressed in some light blue pajama pants and one of my shirts. But those are gone now. I normally sleep naked, so it was easy for her to get what she wanted. She rarely initiates, so this was maybe the third time in 2 years. She was on top, aggressive. Not that I'm complaining. Finding that kind of passion is like spotting a unicorn. Afterward, she got up and left the tent without a light. I thought she had to pee, but she never just gets up and leaves like that. She left the flap open, so I figured she'd be back soon. I noticed the silence around us. No rustling, no sounds at all. Then I heard footsteps returning. She slipped back in, dressed again. I was about to ask why she left her clothes outside, but she was already asleep, her head resting on my chest. I kissed her forehead, zipped the tent, and finally crashed, listening to the absolute stillness of the woods. Morning came with pancakes and bacon over the fire. I mentioned last night's strange events, but she looked at me like I was crazy. She only remembered waking up to pee, taking the flashlight, then going back to sleep. Not superstitious, she blamed the alcohol and was glad I was happy, and that was that. I started breaking down camp and packed some things for her. I watched her walk into the woods, naked again in broad daylight, giggling at my reaction. She knelt on the rolled-up tent for a while, then walked back toward camp. I was struggling to keep up, but happy she was comfortable. Back at camp, I napped in the sunlit chair. I woke to her being touchy again. Afterward, I passed out hard. Later, a storm rolled in, wind and rain hitting the camp. Lila was on the couch, reading in just her underwear. I wasn't sure what prompted the change, but I didn't mind. While packing the next morning, I noticed her blue pajama pants and my shirt were missing. She said they were already packed. I went outside to pee, feeling the rain on me. I thought I heard her calling, but when I checked, she wasn't. Maybe just my imagination. That night, she kept me awake before I finally crashed. Early morning, I woke with a headache and had to pee again. I turned on my flashlight, covering it to keep the light soft. Lila sat up, her eyes white and cloudy in the dim light. Then she blinked, and they were normal again. She cursed me for shining the light in her face, and I apologized. She wanted me to hurry back. The storm had passed. I went outside and shined my light near the tree line while I relieved myself. The beam caught a patch of disturbed earth, scratched and dug up, with blood everywhere. No tracks, just signs of a struggle. No carcass either. It was close to camp, which made me uneasy. If whatever it was dragged the body off, I wasn't keen on going after it. The next morning, we packed up and headed home. We talked about the weekend, but Lila's memory was fuzzy. She wasn't that drunk, so I didn't know what to think. She entertained me during the drive, something new for her. Her personality felt different, especially regarding sex, but otherwise normal. When I asked why she was less inhibited, she just shrugged and smiled, saying, "I got over it." Months have passed, and her appetite hasn't slowed. Honestly, I'm struggling to keep up. I'm more tired, noticing white hairs and feeling older. I want to talk to a doctor, but can't afford it. I tell her I'm tired. She just brings out more energy from me, and then I crash. I don't know how long I can keep this up. I even struggled to write this down in peace. If you have any idea what's going on, please, I'm all ears. Hey, I want to share something that's been on my mind lately. These nightmares I've been having ever since my boyfriend, let's call him Adrian, and I moved in together. It's been unsettling, and honestly, I think talking about it might help. So, picture this. It's late at night, and I hear a voice calling my name, softly. "Adrian?" I whisper into the dim room, the shadows curling around the corners like silent watchers. "Is that you?" And there he is, Adrian, standing just inside the doorway. He answers, "Of course, who else would it be?" His voice is familiar, warm, but as I look closer, my heart starts to pound. Something feels off. The more I stare into his face, the more my chest tightens with an unease I can't shake. His eyes, they seem different, wider apart than I remember. I'm sure they used to be closer together, weren't they? And his smile, something about it makes my skin crawl. I think of the dimple on his right cheek, the one I've kissed 100 times. But this version, this imposter has a dimple on the left. Or am I just losing my mind in the dark? I take a step back, the room suddenly colder. Adrian steps forward, but it's not the gentle man I know. He grabs my forearm roughly, something he would never do. He's pulling me in, his grin stretching wider, more menacing. I scream, but then I'm awake, thrashing in our bedroom. Real Adrian is there, rubbing my arm gently, whispering, "It's okay, you're safe now." The next morning, I tell him about the nightmare. We're still getting used to this new rhythm of waking up together, this shared space. He asks, "What was in the dream?" I try to explain, my voice shaky. "It's like you were there, but not really. You looked like you, but something was twisted, wrong, like you were an imposter. And the more I looked, the scarier you became. I woke up just as you were about to do something terrible." He listens closely, his face softening. "That is creepy," he says. I nod, and then I tell him about my childhood nightmares, how they started when my mom was sick, how I dreamed she looked healthy at first, but then her image would warp, her hair falling out, her skin paling until she became a monster with a cruel grin. I tell him how those dreams filled me with panic because I couldn't stop what was happening. He squeezes my hand gently. I'm sorry, that sounds so hard. I explain how my therapist once told me those dreams were my brain's way of expressing fears I couldn't control. And now, as an adult, big changes like moving in with someone can trigger that same dread. Adrian nods, understanding. I reflect that I never had a mom to talk to about these things. She passed before meeting Adrian. My dad was distant, and after Mom died, I stayed with my stepdad, Steve, who was like family. I call Steve to share the dream, and we have one of those honest, comforting talks. He says, "It's probably just the new environment unsettling you. I wouldn't worry unless it becomes a pattern." I confess I'm not seeing my therapist right now, insurance changes and all, but I feel okay. I'm proud of the progress I've made managing anxiety on my own. Then, about a week later, the nightmare returns. This time, I come home and see Adrian sitting at the kitchen table, but something's terribly wrong. His head tilts unnaturally to the side, like a broken doll. His voice is low, distorted. "What do you mean? My head always looks like this," he says with a grin that reveals sharp, pointed teeth. I want to scream, but only manage a terrified silence as his laugh echoes. "What are you so afraid of?" I wake, tears streaming, Adrian rubbing my back, whispering reassuring words. But even as he says it, I catch a glimmering of his teeth, sharp, glinting in the dim light, and I shake my head to dispel the nightmare's residue. After the second nightmare, Adrian becomes more attentive, offering to help me feel more at home or to see my therapist again. I tell him I'm fine, but in a call with Steve, I admit it still feels like I'm not settled. Steve reminds me that it's okay to feel this way. "PTSD isn't a reflection of your strength," he says gently. I think about my attachment issues, how losing my mom made me scared to rely on anyone. Adrian's consistency has been a balm. If he says he'll be there, he is. We moved in together after 15 months, excited but cautious. Our apartment is beautiful. The black-trimmed windows, the tree brushing the bedroom window in the morning light, the quiet that feels like safety. Yet, I can't shake the unease. One afternoon, Adrian surprises me. "I have to run an errand tonight," he says, "but I've got a surprise for you." Later, when he comes home, a bark fills the air, and a furry blur crashes into me. "Did you?" I ask, stunned. He grins. "Yep. I thought a dog might help make this place feel more like home." Tears come as I wipe the goo from my face and meet Milo, the Australian shepherd with a speckled snout and cream belly. We rename him from Snickers to Milo, and suddenly the apartment feels alive. Milo brings joy, walks, and occasional messes, and I send Steve pictures, grateful for his support. But then, another dream, this one with Milo. In it, his bark sounds strange, like it's coming from a machine. His eyes widen unnaturally, taking over his face until all I see are eyes and a gaping mouth. I scream as he prepares to pounce. I wake alone, morning light spilling in, my body aching with fever. I message my manager I won't be in, feeling weak and afraid. Adrian and Milo come home. I try to smile despite the chills. Adrian checks my forehead, gentle and concerned, promising soup and care. Later, I call Steve. "I'm not doing so great," I admit, feverish and drained. He listens, his voice steady. "Rest up, you're strong. We'll get through this." And I realize, amidst the shadows and fears, I'm not alone. Adrian, Milo, Steve, they're my anchors. And though the nightmares visit, the light of their presence reminds me there's safety beyond the darkness. You know, I grew up in Madras, which most people know now as Chennai, down in South India. And not too far from our house, maybe a little over a kilometer away, there was this old neighborhood called Diamante Colony. Everyone in that part of the city knew about it. It had a reputation. Not the fun, harmless kind either. People whispered about old houses, strange incidents, families that had fallen apart in terrible ways, and that heavy feeling some places seem to carry for no clear reason. The kind of place where even the air feels like it is holding its breath. This was years before the movie came out and made the place even more famous. Back then, it was just one of those local stories everyone knew, but nobody really wanted to test too closely. About 15 or 16 years ago, my oldest cousin on my mother's side was getting married. A lot of our relatives flew in from New Zealand, where they had settled, and they brought a few friends along for the wedding as well. So the house was packed. Some people stayed with my grandparents, and a few others stayed at a small guest house nearby. One evening, all of us decided to go out for dinner at a Chinese restaurant that used to be very popular in the area. The funny thing was, the restaurant was on the other side of Diamante Colony from where we lived. There were around 16 or 17 of us, including some older relatives, so we went in 2 cars and 1 auto rickshaw. Dinner was lovely. Loud, warm, chaotic, the usual family wedding kind of evening. Everyone was full and happy by the time we came out. Now, this was before Uber and Ola were everywhere, so getting everyone back home was a bit of a small operation. My father and my brother decided to take the elderly relatives and a few guests first, drop them home, and then come right back for the rest of us. It was barely a kilometer, so they said, "Just start walking along this road. We'll come around and pick you up in 5 minutes." There weren't many routes anyway, so it seemed simple enough. So we started walking. It was my mother, a couple of her brothers, a few cousins, and me. And as we got closer to Diamante Colony, my mother and uncles began talking about the old stories again. Not in a dramatic way. More like people remembering something they had lived near all their lives. They talked about certain houses that had always seemed wrong. About how people avoided walking that stretch after dark. About the strange silence there, and how even stray dogs didn't seem to linger. Naturally, we were all trying to act brave, but I remember that little nervous excitement in the group. We were spooked, yes, but curious too. That dangerous little combination. We walked right through the Colony Road, the whole stretch. And the odd thing was, we didn't see either car. Not once. At first we joked about it. Maybe my dad had taken a wrong turn. Maybe my brother had stopped somewhere. But then 5 minutes became 10. The road was not long. My father knew those streets very well. He had been driving through that area since the days he was courting my mother, so it was not as if he could get lost there. Still, no car came. The neighborhood felt emptier than it should have. The houses were dark. The road was quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. It felt watched. Eventually, we reached the main road on the other side, and there they were. Both cars were parked just beyond the entrance to the Colony Road, hazard lights blinking in the dark. We walked up laughing at first, asking my father what had taken him so long. But he did not laugh. He looked genuinely worried. He said, "Where were you all? I drove through that road twice. Your brother did too. We even checked the other side in case you had taken a different turn. We couldn't find you." That shut us up very quickly, because we had not taken a different road. We had walked straight through Diamante Colony, exactly where we were supposed to be. My father said he had even tried calling, but the calls would not connect. And there we were, a group of 6 or 7 people walking together on a narrow road at night. Not exactly easy to miss, but somehow they did not see us, and somehow we did not see them. Later, when the film came out, people started talking about Diamante Colony all over again. Some began climbing walls and sneaking into the old houses, pretending to be ghost hunters. The properties were said to belong to an old Englishman, Jonathan Dumont, or perhaps his descendants, but because of legal issues, the houses stayed abandoned for years. The whole place sat there quietly, right near what used to be one of the city's well-known hotels, changing names over time before eventually being demolished and redeveloped. But for me, none of that really matters. I don't need a movie, or a legend, or a ghost story to make that place feel wrong. I remember walking through it. I remember the silence. And I remember coming out the other side to find 2 cars waiting for us, with 2 drivers who swore they had passed through the same road and never seen us at all. Even now, I avoid that stretch whenever I can, day or night. Some places you just don't argue with. I want to start by saying I've had strange things happen around me for most of my life, but most of them were small enough that I could brush them off. This one, though, has stayed with me. I grew up in Massachusetts, but during my last year of high school, I moved down to Florida to live with my grandparents. They were the ones who really raised me. My mother had always been very spiritual and believed strongly in paranormal things, but she wasn't around much when I was growing up. She left when my siblings and I were young, so my grandparents became home for me. At the time this happened, I was the only one of my siblings living with them. One night, I woke up suddenly because I heard someone screaming my name. And when I say it sounded real, I mean it sounded exactly like my grandfather. It was loud, angry, and almost strained, like his voice was mixed with this deep humming or moaning sound. It sounded like he was calling me to come over, like I had done something wrong. I sat straight up in bed, half asleep and confused, and I remember saying, "What? What did I do?" I genuinely thought I was in trouble. The next morning, I asked my grandparents why they had been yelling for me in the middle of the night. They both just stared at me like they had no idea what I was talking about. My grandfather said he hadn't called me. My grandmother said they had both slept through the whole night. I argued with them because I knew what I heard. It wasn't a dream to me. It was clear. It was close. It was their voice. But they never changed their answer. After that, I messaged my mom, even though we barely talk and getting hold of her is usually difficult. I told her what happened, and her response honestly gave me chills. She said there was something she called a mimic that had followed my grandmother for years. According to her, when she was growing up, she would hear voices that sounded exactly like family members, even when those people weren't there. I don't know much about mimics or whether I fully believe in all of that, but hearing her say it made my stomach drop, because it fit too well. And looking back, there were other things connected to my grandmother that I never really understood. When my siblings and I were younger and still living in Massachusetts, there were times we would open our bedroom door and find my Nan just standing there, silently in the hallway. She wouldn't knock. She wouldn't speak. She would just stand outside the door. Then she would turn and walk back to her room. Later, if we asked her about it, she wouldn't remember doing it at all. At the time, we thought it was strange, but we didn't know what to make of it, so we let it go. A few months after the voice incident, I left for college in Georgia. Nothing huge happened there, but I still had little uneasy moments now and then. The kind of things you tell yourself are nothing because you don't want to think too hard about them. Then, recently, something happened that brought all of it back. I was back in Massachusetts for the summer, staying at my boyfriend's house. His house has always felt a little off to me, but I had never actually seen anything there myself. That night, I decided to sleep on the couch in his room instead of in bed with him. It wasn't anything serious. I was just being dramatic and wanted a little extra attention. At some point in the middle of the night, I woke up and saw what I thought was my boyfriend standing near the corner of the room, close to his bed. At first, I wasn't scared at all. It looked like him. The shape was right. The height was right. The way it moved seemed familiar. The only thing that was different was that it was completely dark, almost like a shadow. I couldn't see his face or any color, but I thought maybe the room was just too dim. I honestly believed he had gotten up and was coming over to get me from the couch. I even started reaching my hand out to him because we have this little routine where I pretend I'm about to fall off the couch, and he comes over, picks me up, kisses me, and brings me back to bed. But this figure didn't come toward me. It just stood there for a moment. Then it started moving strangely. The best way I can describe it is almost like dancing, but not in a normal way. The movements were unnatural, slow, and odd, like they didn't belong to a real person. I was staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Then something in my head clicked, and I looked over at the bed. My actual boyfriend was still asleep, so whatever was standing there was not him. I froze. I started whispering his name over and over until he woke up. When he realized how scared I was, he got scared too. He pulled me into bed with him, and I remember telling him to stay quiet because, for some reason, I didn't want whatever I had seen to know that I was afraid. I still don't know what to think. Maybe there's a normal explanation. Maybe there isn't. But between the voice that sounded like my grandfather and the shadow that looked like my boyfriend, I can't shake the feeling that something has been copying people around me. And I'm wondering if anyone else has ever experienced something like this. You know, it started so innocently. Just one strand of hair on my pillowcase. It was long, black, and so striking against my soft beige sheets. I caught sight of it one morning, and I couldn't help but smile. It was hers, unmistakably. Her name was Lila, and her hair always fell just past her shoulders, glossy and straight, like a ribbon of midnight silk. No matter how many times she used a curling iron, it always smoothed back into that sleek, perfect style. Those first few nights we spent together, I started noticing her hair everywhere in my little apartment. On my sweaters, tangled in the cuffs, little clusters scattered across the bathroom floor, like dark petals fallen in a breeze. Once my friend Matt was messing with my blonde curls and suddenly held up a long black strand between his fingers. "How'd that get here?" he asked, laughing. I laughed too, feeling a strange warmth at these small reminders of her, scattered so randomly, weaving through my days like silent whispers. One evening, we were lounging on my couch, feet propped up, smoking together. The air was thick, heavy with the relentless heat of a Los Angeles summer, the little swirls of smoke drifting lazily, almost hypnotic. Lila brushed her hair back from her face, and I noticed the sweat glistening at the nape of her neck. I leaned over, kissed her gently, and whispered, "Leave your hair down a little longer, please." But then, the heat lifted, and with it came something else, something ominous. I was at a bar celebrating a friend's birthday when a stranger tapped my shoulder. Her eyes were a cold, piercing gray, and she was unnervingly tall, with limbs that seemed to stretch on forever. I had to tilt my head back just to meet her gaze. "I'm sorry," she said softly, "but I had to meet you. I think you're stunning." Her hair was buzzed close to her scalp, stark and sharp against her pale skin. When I told her that Lila and I were over, her lips trembled. "But I love you," she said, her voice fragile. As she spoke, I couldn't help but notice her fingers restlessly twirling the uneven ends of her hair. I reached out, took her hands gently, and pressed them to my lips. "You're going to be okay," I promised, though my heart clenched tight. That first night she stayed over, we watched a movie together. There was this moment, quiet and tender, when the protagonist asked, "Do you think I'm pretty?" His simple, heartfelt yes brought a smile to both their faces. Lila turned to me then, her eyes searching. "Do you think I'm pretty?" she asked softly. I hesitated, the words caught in my throat. Then, with a half smile, half whisper, I said, "You could be worse." She laughed, playful and light, and tossed a pillow at me. But as our eyes dropped to where the pillow had just been, something caught us off guard. There was hair. Long, dark hair. "Oh," she murmured, cheeks flushed bright with embarrassment. I felt my own face heat up. "I'm sorry," I stammered, grabbing the strands and jumping out of bed. "My ex, she had this thick, long hair. It always got everywhere. I guess I missed a spot." Lila smiled, though her tone was tight. "Well," she said, "there's nothing a good wash can't fix." But the hair kept appearing. On my kitchen table, in my car, tucked inside my purse. Week after week, month after month, it was there, like some haunting echo. One evening, Lila's voice broke through my mounting anxiety, sharp and angry. "We need to talk." "I swear," I insisted, throwing my hands up, "I haven't seen her since we started dating. Check my phone, my social media. I haven't spoken to her in months." "Then how do you explain all this hair?" she demanded. I felt a rising panic and decided to confront my ex. I used GPS to find her apartment, something that should have been second nature, yet suddenly felt alien. I knocked frantically. "Hey, open up. I know you're in there." A muffled, choked voice called my name. "Yeah, it's me. Please, we need to talk." The door creaked open just a crack. "Please, just let me in." "No," she whispered, tears thick in her voice. "Look," I said, trying to steady myself. "I don't know how you're doing this or why, but I'm asking you to stay away. Don't come near me or my home. Just stop messing with my life." Silence. "What are you talking about?" "The hair," I shouted. "It's everywhere. It's creepy and it has to stop." More silence. "Did you get my messages?" I asked, cheeks burning with embarrassment. I had blocked her number after the breakup. "No," she replied, and then sighed deeply. Slowly, the door opened wider, revealing her. Thin, pale, with sunken skin and dark circles that told stories of endless nights. She looked as if time had aged her 10 years in just 6 months. "Cancer," she said quietly. I stared, the word hitting me like a thunderclap. "I tried texting, calling," she explained, voice breaking. "But you never answered. Is this some sick joke? You heard the news and came here to mock me? To play a prank?" No," I stammered, overwhelmed. "I didn't know. I had no idea." "I haven't been near your place," she insisted. "I don't know what you're talking about." As she spoke, I noticed her hair, once thick and shining, had thinned to fragile wisps. She caught me staring and slammed the door shut. As I walked away, I heard her scream through the door. "You're going to be okay, I promise." After that, the hair came in waves. It clogged my pipes, first the shower, then the kitchen sink. When the plumber came, he glanced at me oddly, asked if I had a dog, and hurried out without explanation. I found hair in my dryer, in the carpet, even in the dishwasher. I stopped having people over after Lila left me. "You're sick," she spat one day, storming out after finding clumps of hair in her gym bag. I thought, I'm not the sick one, but I kept my silence. A month later, I took a bite of a sandwich and felt something strange. I pulled out a tangled ball of hair from my mouth, disgusted, spitting it onto my plate. "Stop it!" I screamed at those dark strands. "Just make it stop." But deep down, a chilling truth gnawed at me. The hair stopping would mean something far worse. And that thought? That terrified me more than anything else. Hey, I want to share with you this story that happened to me when I was just a kid, but it's stuck with me ever since. It still gives me and my dad the chills whenever we think about it. I never got a clear answer about what really happened, and honestly, my dad didn't push it either after he saw what happened himself. So, Here goes. I'm from the south of Minas Gerais, Brazil. My uncle owns a spare parts store, and he needed to make a trip to Sao Paulo to pick up some supplies. Since he wasn't familiar with the city, my dad went with him to help out, and I tagged along too. My dad knew Sao Paulo well, so it made sense. After a long, exhausting day wandering through one of the busiest streets in Sao Paulo, 25 de Março, a place packed with shops and people, we stopped at this Arabic restaurant. I was probably around 8 or 10 years old, though I'm 26 now, so it's a bit fuzzy. Anyway, I really needed to use the restroom and grab a bite, so we went inside. My dad waited outside while I went in. Now, here's where things get really strange. When I came out of the restroom, I wasn't where I expected to be at all. Instead of the restaurant, I found myself in this old, tall building's lobby. It was quiet, kind of cold, and everything looked worn down, like something from a different time. I remember thinking, what on earth? One moment I was in this lively restaurant, and the next, I was somewhere completely different. I tried to go back inside the restroom, hoping to just walk back out and be where I was supposed to be. But every time I opened that door and stepped through, I was back in the same old lobby. I did this about 3 times, desperately trying to find my way back. It was creeping me out, and I had no idea what to do. There's something else I can't quite shake from my memory. A man. I think he was a receptionist, sitting on a chair in the lobby. I tried to talk to him, to explain what was happening, but he didn't respond. And honestly, whether because I was scared or confused, I just ignored him and moved on. Finally, I decided to try to find the restaurant from the outside. I was tempted to cross the street. I honestly think if I had, things might have ended differently. But I stayed on the same sidewalk and turned left. After walking a bit more, I found the restaurant again. Some of the details in my mind are blurry, like how long I'd been in that lobby or exactly how I got back. It all feels like a dream that I'm trying hard to remember. My dad told me later that maybe I had just come out into a different hallway and gotten turned around. But the restroom door was right there, and he saw me come out. It doesn't add up. The restaurant's restroom entrance was pretty straightforward, nothing complicated or hidden. I even looked up the place. Raful, it's called, on 25 de Março. I checked Google Maps, hoping to spot the building or recognize that lobby, but nothing matched what I saw. Sometimes I wonder if I slipped into some kind of alternate reality, like a glitch in the Matrix, or maybe a place from a Brazilian urban legend, like the 7 Alem. Now, on a different note, something else spooky happened to me recently. It was Sunday night, October 9th. My dogs were really on edge, staring out the windows like they saw something I couldn't. So I let them outside. My house has this setup where you go through one set of doors from the main house into 2 additional rooms, then another set of doors to the backyard. When I let the dogs out, the door was open, but locked in place with the lock keeping it from closing. I was sure I was the last person to touch the door, and I definitely closed it properly. So, why was it locked open? It made me nervous, but I brushed it off and went about my night. Around midnight, I went to sleep, but at 2 a.m., my dog started barking wildly at something in my room. I looked, half asleep, and saw a tall figure standing there. I didn't know what it was. It didn't register clearly, just this looming presence. I was so scared that I hid under my blankets and started crying like a kid. For the rest of the night, I barely slept because I was so anxious. I told my mom and sister about it. They said it was probably nothing, just my imagination. Some friends suggested it might have been sleep paralysis. I tried to believe them and went on with my day, but I was still uneasy. The next night, I was so anxious that I slept with the lights and TV on. Thankfully, I slept okay, and nothing strange woke me or my dogs. But when I woke up for work that morning, something else freaked me out. One of my evil eye bracelets had fallen off. Now, it wasn't broken or slid off. It was fully intact. The only way it could have come off was if it was unclasped. But I don't remember unclasping it. And here's the weird part. I toss and turn a lot in bed, but I found the bracelet neatly underneath me on the bed, not on the floor. It felt like it had been placed there. I don't know if these things are connected or if it's just my mind playing tricks on me. But between the strange restroom incident from my childhood and the eerie things happening now, I can't help but wonder if I'm being haunted somehow. Honestly, it's unsettling. But sharing it with you here makes me feel a little less alone in all this. So, I was around 15 when all of this happened, and honestly, I still think about that house more than I want to. My mom and I have always been pretty sensitive to things we can't explain. She would notice energy shifts before anyone said a word, and I had already been practicing witchcraft for a couple of years by then. So when we moved during COVID from the home I grew up in to a house closer to my stepdad's father, I could tell something was off immediately. The first time I walked inside, I felt sick to my stomach. Not nervous, not just uncomfortable. Sick. It felt like something in that house noticed me the second I stepped through the door. I remember thinking, nope, I don't like it here. My brother was the only one who slept upstairs. It was kind of like a loft area with his bedroom, a bathroom, and a second little living room. At night, we would hear water running up there, cabinets opening and closing, footsteps sometimes too, but nobody would be upstairs, or my brother would be asleep. My mom would text him in the middle of the night asking him to please be quiet because she's a nurse and a light sleeper, and he'd be confused, telling her he wasn't doing anything. Sometimes even he would hear the noises from his room, knowing no one else was up there. His closet bothered me the most. When we first moved in, we found old baby pictures that belonged to the previous owner's son tucked away in that room, which was already strange enough. But whenever I was upstairs alone, I felt like something was watching me from inside that closet. I hated being in his room unless he was there, or unless I was on FaceTime with someone while playing Minecraft just to feel less alone. Then I had sleep paralysis in that house. Twice. I had never had it before that house, and I haven't had it since. The first time, I saw a woman standing in my room. She had long, dark hair and a long, pale dress. She didn't come toward me or do anything aggressive. She just watched me. It didn't feel kind exactly, but it didn't feel evil either. It almost felt like she was checking on me, or studying me. About a week later, it happened again, but this time the feeling was completely different. The room felt heavy, dark, like dread had crawled into the air. I couldn't move, and then I saw a figure above the door. It looked like a man, but completely shadowed out, almost black. He was wearing a hat, and he was crawling across the ceiling toward me. I panicked so hard inside my own body. I started praying in my head, even though I couldn't really speak. I kept repeating that I was surrounded by light and love, that I was protected, that nothing dark could touch me. I was grabbing onto anything I could think of just to break out of it. Eventually, he was gone. I don't know exactly when he left, but I know I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. As soon as the sun came up, I cleansed my room. Later on, I found out that a few blocks away from that house, years before, a man had committed a double homicide and then taken his own life. That alone made my stomach drop. But then it got even stranger. I told a friend of mine about the woman I saw, and he lived right across the street from that house with his grandparents. He told me his grandma had once seen a woman in the driveway who matched what I described. She had also seen other figures with her, and she said they looked like they didn't belong. That part still gives me chills. The house itself was newer than a lot of the homes nearby, so I don't know if it was the house, the land, or something that followed someone there. The family who sold it to us moved because the husband had ALS and needed to be closer to treatment. We only stayed there for about 2 years. Things with my stepdad got worse. My mom eventually divorced him, and we moved out. The people after us only stayed around 2 years too, and they also ended up divorcing. Maybe that's a coincidence. Maybe not. A lot of people in my town believe there are old indigenous burial sites somewhere in the area because the land belonged to indigenous people long before it became what it is now. People here have always said strange things happen on this land. I also grew up hearing that our town had one of the earliest school shootings and that bombs were built here during World War II. I don't know how much of that is fact and how much is local rumor, but I do know how that house felt. And that house did not feel empty. I'm a mother of 3. I have 2 little girls and 1 little boy. My girls are 6 and 4, and my youngest is still just a toddler. And I want to say this from the beginning. I'm not sharing this because I think it's fun, or because I want attention. I'm sharing it because I honestly don't know what else to do anymore. Before we had children, my husband had already experienced a lot of strange things. Not just once or twice either. His whole family had stories. Radios turning on by themselves. Toys making noise in the middle of the night. His younger brother waking up because something had called him or gotten his attention. Rocks being moved outside in a way that almost looked arranged. Even his mother once hearing a voice answer her when she asked if the baby was okay. And the strange thing is, his family never really reacted the way I would have expected. Their attitude was almost, just ignore it and it'll stop. But when my husband and I started living together, those things didn't completely disappear. They just became quieter for a while. The first place we lived together was this old yellow house. It had originally been a mobile home, but over time people had added rooms and walls and little extensions until it looked more like a regular house. One part of it had this long hallway that led toward the back, where the washer and dryer were. At night, that hallway felt wrong. I don't know how else to explain it. During the day, it was just a hallway, but once it got dark, it felt heavy. It felt like something was sitting down there, waiting. One of my dogs would stand at the entrance and stare all the way down it. She would whine and refuse to walk through it. And honestly, I didn't blame her. I didn't like going down there either. After I had my first baby, things got worse. I started waking up at night to the sound of something running across the ceiling. And I don't mean a little scratching sound. I mean running. Fast. Back and forth, right over our heads. My dogs heard it too. They would bark and run outside, following whatever it was from below. So one day, I climbed up and checked the roof because I thought maybe it was a cat, a raccoon, anything normal. There was nothing. No tracks, no damage, no sign that anything had been up there. And because the house had been built in such a patchwork way, the roof didn't even seem strong enough for a person to run across safely. Around that same time, I started seeing this white cloud inside the house. It wasn't like smoke. It wasn't thin or see-through. It was thick, almost like a heavy white fog, and it would fill part of the room. Most of the time, it happened when I was alone with my baby. And then, the dreams started. I had terrible dreams about something trying to take my baby from me. In one dream, something carried her away toward a tree. In another, I felt like something was watching us through the window. I know dreams are not proof of anything. I know that. But when you put everything together, the footsteps on the ceiling, the fog, the hallway, the way my dog acted, and those dreams, I had this deep feeling that something was paying attention to my child. Eventually, things slowed down, and we moved before my oldest turned 1. The second place was what my daughter used to call the red house. That house had 2 floors, a front yard and a backyard. Someone told us one of the owner's parents had died there. I don't remember anymore if it was the mother or the father, but people said that might have been why the house felt so heavy. But to me, it wasn't only heaviness. The backyard felt like someone was watching from it. Not just watching, actually. Waiting. Inside the house, we would hear movement where nobody was. If we were downstairs, we would hear someone upstairs. If we were upstairs, we would hear someone moving below us. That was also when my oldest daughter started being affected more directly. When she began sleeping in her own room, she would wake up and tell us there was someone under her bed. She said they woke her up. She said she would tell them, "I need to sleep. Leave me alone." And according to her, whoever it was would say, "No." After that, she would come into our room. It kept happening until she didn't want to sleep alone anymore, and we finally moved her into our bedroom. Sometimes I would see her talking when nobody was there, but if I asked who she was talking to, her whole face would change. It was like someone had told her not to say anything. She would immediately deny it and say she was just playing by herself. I also had my own moments in that house. Sometimes I would feel a hand touch my shoulder. Other times I would suddenly feel, with total certainty, that my husband was standing beside me or behind me. You know that feeling when someone familiar is close to you, even before you look? That's what it felt like. But when I turned around, nobody was there. After that, we moved again. By then, we had 2 daughters. We moved into a 1-story apartment with 2 bedrooms. My husband's parents had actually lived there before us, so we had visited that apartment many times before moving in. Even back then, my oldest talked about a man she saw there. She said he was very tall, almost as tall as the ceiling. She said he was completely dark, like a shadow, and old. She said he would stand in the corner and watch. Sometimes she would point right at the corner and tell us he was there. Then she would move her fingers slowly, like she was following him as he walked. She also said he stayed in her grandparents' closet. Another strange thing in that apartment was the smell. Every now and then, there would be a strong tobacco smell. Not cigarettes. It smelled older than that, like cigars, like stale smoke from somewhere far away. It would appear out of nowhere and then vanish. When we officially moved in, I cleaned the apartment from top to bottom. I also prayed and spiritually cleansed it. For a while, it felt peaceful. No tobacco smell, no noises, no strange feeling. Then slowly, little things started again. So I cleaned and cleansed the place again, and once more it became calm. Now my second daughter is 4. I'll call her Cece. Recently, Cece started waking up at night and coming into my room crying. She would say she was scared, then crawl into bed and fall back asleep. We have a 360-degree camera in the living room. It detects movement and turns to follow it. So I started checking the camera footage to see what was happening at night. Cece usually wakes up sometime between midnight and around 3:30 in the morning. At first, I thought she was just getting up to use the bathroom. But after watching several recordings, I noticed she does almost the same thing every time. She opens her bedroom door. She sticks her head out and looks around the living room, almost like she's searching for someone. Then she goes into the bathroom and closes the door. When she comes back out, she looks around again. She checks the room before going back into her bedroom. She leaves the bathroom light on, leaves her bedroom door open, and goes back to sleep. Sometimes she does this more than once, going back and forth. But the part that really bothered me was the camera. When Cece comes out, The camera follows her like it's supposed to. Then suddenly, it turns away from her and points toward another part of the living room. There is nothing there. Then it turns back to Cece. Then it moves back again toward the empty area. It looks like the camera is tracking her, and then tracking someone else that I can't see. I asked Cece why she keeps waking up. Her answers are always simple because she's still little. She says, "I'm scared." She says, "The monster is there." She says, "The corner is scary." She says, "It's big." That is what made my stomach drop, because it reminded me of what my oldest used to say. Tall, dark, scary, in the corner. My son is different. He's much harder to frighten. With him, it doesn't seem like something wakes him up. It's more like something calls him or gets his attention. Sometimes he points up at the ceiling and calls us over to look. There's never anything there. My husband has taught him that if something bothers him, he can tell it to go away. So now my son will throw toys upward and say, "No, no, no." Then he'll squat down and argue with empty air like he's scolding someone. And strangely enough, whatever it is doesn't seem to bother him much anymore. There was also one night close to Christmas that I can't stop thinking about. I woke up around 3 in the morning, facing my bedroom door. From where I was lying, I could see blue light coming from the living room. At first, I thought we had left the TV on. I started to get up, but then this fear hit me. It wasn't normal fear. It wasn't just being startled in the dark. I felt cold all over. I felt terrified of the living room, or whatever was in it. So I stayed in bed and stared at the doorway. The light from the TV kept changing, like someone was browsing through things or clicking around. The next morning, I checked the living room. The TV was off, so I went straight to the camera footage. At around 3 a.m., the TV turned on. Around 3:10, a movie started playing. Around 3:30, it switched to pictures of our family. Around 3:40, the TV turned off by itself. When I watched the video closely, I saw 2 very fast little lights moving around. I know people say dust, bugs, reflections, all of that, but these moved differently. They crossed each other quickly, almost too quickly. Then, near the space between the TV and the Christmas tree, I saw something pale and shadowy rise up. It looked like it expanded for a second. Then the TV went off. I even joked afterward because I didn't know what else to do. I thought, so whatever this is can watch TV, but it can't help with the bills? But really, I was scared. And now things are still happening. Just this morning, around 5, my husband was getting ready for work. He was in the living room near the girls' bedroom. Their bedroom door opened. He waited because he thought Cece was coming out, but nobody came out. He waited again. Still nothing. So he went into their room to check on them. Both girls were completely asleep. That's where I am now. I have cleaned the house. I have prayed. I cover the mirrors in my girls' room at night. When I cleanse the home, things calm down for a while, but then they slowly come back. And lately, it almost feels like the more I try to cleanse, the more active everything becomes. I don't know if this is one thing following us, or several different things. I don't know if it's connected to my husband's family, to the houses, or to my children. But what scares me is the pattern. In the yellow house, before my oldest could even explain anything, I had this awful feeling that something was interested in her. In the red house, she said someone was waking her up and refusing to let her sleep. In the apartment, she described a tall, dark figure watching from the corner. Now Cece is saying there is a big, scary monster in the corner. My son points at things we can't see and argues with someone. And my camera keeps turning away from my daughter to follow an empty space in the living room. My biggest fear is my children. I feel like if I don't find a way to protect them, this will keep growing until it becomes more serious. So I'm asking from a very real place, Has anyone experienced something that seemed to follow a family through different homes? Could the things my children are seeing be connected? And most importantly, what can I actually do to protect my kids? I was never the kind of person who believed in signs, spirits, or anything you couldn't pin down with a normal explanation. Back then, my girlfriend was into witchcraft. She practiced it seriously, and honestly, I used to go back and forth between thinking it was kind of charming and thinking it was nonsense. But it never bothered me. It made her happy, and I liked seeing her have something that felt meaningful to her. At the time, I was mostly staying at her place, but every now and then I'd spend a few nights at my grandma's house because it was closer to work. And that's where the first strange thing happened. One night in 2021, I was alone in the garage after my grandparents had gone to sleep. I was sitting there with the side door open, smoking, having a drink, and listening to music. The backyard was quiet. Everything felt ordinary. Then I heard this hard thud on top of one of the trash bins outside. At first, I thought it was probably a raccoon or maybe a cat jumping down from the fence. But a few seconds later, I heard this sound that still bothers me when I think about it. It started low and deep, almost like a growl, then rose into something sharper. It had this animal quality to it, but it sounded too big to be a cat. Too heavy. Too wrong. My body reacted before my brain did. I got up, shut the door, locked it, and went straight inside. The next day, I asked my grandparents if they'd heard anything outside. They hadn't. I tried explaining the sound, but there wasn't really a good way to describe it. They brushed it off, so I tried to do the same. But the next night, it came back. Same place, same kind of sound. I shut the door again and went upstairs, shaken. I called my girlfriend and said, "Babe, it came back." I tried describing it to her, but every explanation sounded ridiculous once it left my mouth. Eventually, the only thing I could say was, "It sounded like suffering." About a week later, my grandparents went out of town. My girlfriend came to stay with me because their house had a bigger kitchen, and we both loved to cook. We made a night out of it, had food, relaxed, and later went into the garage to smoke before bed. After maybe 20 minutes, we heard the thud. Then the sound came again. This time, she heard it too. We looked at each other for one frozen second, and I slammed the door shut. But the sound seemed to move closer, right near the door, and it got louder. She didn't say anything. She just rushed inside, and I followed her upstairs. We sat on the futon under my bedroom window, the one that looked out over the backyard. I remember looking at her and saying, "You heard it. You actually heard it." Before she could answer, the sound started again below the window, slower this time, like it was building itself out of the dark. She said, very quietly, "It sounds like something is dying out there." I asked if we should go check. She said, "What if something's hurt?" So I grabbed my everyday carry and went downstairs, with her right behind me. We turned on the backyard lights and looked through the kitchen window. Nothing. No animal. No movement. No explanation. We went back upstairs and spent the rest of the night trying to find similar sounds online, but nothing came close. Eventually, we gave up and watched TV until we fell asleep. That was the last time I ever heard whatever was outside. And honestly, I was just relieved someone else had heard it too. I wasn't alone with it anymore. Over the next couple of years, we brought it up often. She always said it sounded paranormal, and eventually, I stopped arguing with that. I didn't fully understand it, but I was finally open to the possibility that there are things we don't have neat little boxes for. Then, in late 2023, things started getting strange again. Our relationship was falling apart by then. I was having nightmares almost every night. In them, I'd be out somewhere with my girlfriend, and then suddenly I couldn't find her. The dreams got so bad that I started avoiding sleep altogether. One night, after almost 2 days without sleeping, I was lying beside her at her place. I rolled over and saw her asleep on her back, and floating about a foot above her was a woman. She was facing her, hovering parallel to her body, with this twisted grin on her face. She looked like she was chanting something, though I couldn't understand it. Then I felt this vibration behind my eyes and heard a high ringing sound. My eyes snapped open, and the woman was gone. My girlfriend was just lying there beside me. I told myself I must have dreamed it. I told her about it the next morning, and it spooked her a little, but we both let it go. A couple of weeks later, she was making spaghetti. She left 2 jars of sauce on the counter and went into the main house to grab pasta. Our little dog followed her, so I was completely alone in the converted garage where we lived. I was lying on the bed with my laptop when I heard a crash. I got up and found both jars shattered in the middle of the kitchen floor. Not fallen from the edge, not knocked over by the dog, broken in the middle of the floor. I went outside and met my girlfriend as she was coming back. The first thing I said was, "I swear I didn't do it." After that, whenever we heard weird house noises, we'd jokingly say things like, "Stop that," as if something was living there with us. But nothing quite like the jars happened again. At the beginning of 2024, after about 12 years together, we broke up. I moved back to my grandma's house to save money. I was a wreck, drinking heavily, not sleeping much, not taking care of myself. I moved into a different bedroom just to feel like something had changed. Then one night, after my body finally gave in to sleep, I woke up and saw the woman again. She was sitting at the foot of my bed in a pale gray gown. The same vibration came back, the same ringing. Then my eyes snapped open and she was gone. Lying there instead was my dog, a husky shepherd mix named Chloe. My grandfather had always been the closest thing in my family to someone superstitious, and around that time, he started noticing things too. Strange noises at night, footsteps upstairs when my dog and I were downstairs. Objects moved from one place to another. My grandma never heard or saw anything. She looked at both of us like we were losing it. But I kept seeing the woman. Sometimes she was at the foot of my bed, sometimes sitting against the wall, always in that same pale gown. One night, I saw her sitting with her legs curled up, holding a balloon. That's when I started calling her Mina. The name just stuck. As things got stranger, I started reading more about spirituality and witchcraft. By May of 2024, I was buying books from metaphysical shops, setting up an altar in my room, and trying cleansing rituals. Eventually, I tried an exorcism from one of the books, and for a while, it seemed to work. The house calmed down. I stopped seeing Mina. The nightmares stopped too. I even started dating someone new, and for about 6 months, everything felt normal. Then I started getting this heavy feeling that she was going to leave. The nightmares came back. The house activity came back. Mina came back. Not long after that, the girl I was seeing left, and I was right back where I started. Since then, I've stopped trying to force Mina out of my life. I don't really know what she is. I don't know if she's connected to the creature in the backyard. I don't know if she's a warning, a presence, or something my mind reaches for when everything around me is breaking. But strange as it sounds, I've started to feel like she shows up before trouble. I've only seen her a few times since moving out of my grandma's house in 2025. And now, when I do, it doesn't scare me the same way. There's almost something comforting about it. I still don't have answers. I just know that after everything I experienced, I'm not the closed-off skeptic I used to be. I still practice witchcraft now, and I'm much more open to the idea that some things can be real, even when they refuse to explain themselves. I was about 4, my parents split up, and my mom and I moved to a small town in Tennessee. My dad settled about an hour away after being stationed near Fort Campbell. He was a chaplain in the Army, and the whole reason we lived close enough was so he could still see me on weekends. I mention that because what I'm about to tell you didn't just happen in one house, or one neighborhood, or one town. It followed me. I was still really little when I first noticed it. Maybe 4, maybe almost 5. I'd catch this dark shape out of the corner of my eye, always just barely there. It didn't scare me at first. I didn't even know enough to be scared. I just knew something was there when it shouldn't have been. By the time I was 5, I started hearing my name. One time, I was at a playground with my dad, and I heard someone call, "Mason," from inside one of those covered plastic play tunnels. I thought it was another kid, so I ran over and climbed inside. But there was nobody there. The whole space felt cold. Not normal cold either. The air felt damp, almost sticky, like it had been breathed in and out too many times. When I was around 6, I started seeing her. She looked like an elderly woman, hunched over, moving slowly. I'd see her near my mom's neighborhood, by the park, near my dad's place, sometimes even along the road when we were driving. Never inside the house, but almost everywhere else. She would wave at me. Sometimes she'd curl her fingers, like she wanted me to come closer. And she always smiled. That was the worst part. Her mouth smiled, but her eyes didn't. Her eyes looked flat and hungry, like she was pretending to be kind because she knew that was what grown-ups were supposed to look like. I didn't feel terrified then. I was always with someone, my mom, my dad, my friends, so she felt far away. Wrong, but far away. When I was 7, my dad remarried. His wife was from Lebanon, and he had met her while he was overseas. She was deeply Catholic, the kind of person who prayed like she was talking to someone standing right beside her. One afternoon, she was holding my hand while we crossed a street, and the old woman was waiting on the other side. This time she wasn't waving. She was pointing at me. Her face was twisted open, like she was screaming, but at first I couldn't hear anything. Then all at once, I heard my name again and again, louder and louder. "Mason, Mason, Mason." I froze right in the middle of the street and started begging my stepmom to turn around. I didn't even explain. I just said I didn't want to go near her. My stepmom stopped. Her hand tightened around mine. Then she said something under her breath in Arabic, turned us around immediately, and walked us back the way we came without asking me a single question. That night, I overheard her talking to my dad. She told him she had felt something awful in the street, something cold, something possessive. She said she was worried about me. My dad didn't believe in things like that. He brushed it off and said kids imagine things. But she didn't brush it off. When I was 8, things got worse. I started seeing the old woman in reflections, in windows at night, in the dark glass of the TV, sometimes in the mirror for half a second behind me. Then the knocking started. Knocking from inside closets, knocking on windows, knocking on doors late at night, especially when I was alone. Sometimes she would whisper through the door, "Let me in." Other times she would beg, "Open it, Mason. Please open it." I told my mom. I told my dad. They both thought I was scared of the dark, or lonely, or making up stories the way kids do. Only 2 people believed me. My stepmom believed me. She prayed over me whenever I stayed with my dad, and she gave me a rosary to keep in my pocket. And my neighbor believed me. He was an older man named Mr. Alden, probably in his mid-60s. He lived a few houses down from my mom, and sometimes he watched me after school while she was working late. He never made me feel silly. He never laughed. When I told him about the woman, He just listened very carefully. Then, when I was 9, I opened the door. It was late, maybe close to 11. My mom was asleep. Someone knocked at the front door. Not loud, just steady. I remember standing there in my pajamas, angry more than scared. I was tired of hiding, tired of hearing her voice, tired of feeling like something had been circling me for years. So I opened the door. She was standing there. The old woman smiled at me, that same terrible smile, and I told her to leave me alone. She didn't. She reached out and grabbed my arm. Her hand was freezing and wet, and the second she touched me, I knew she was stronger than anything that old should ever be. She started pulling me down the walkway, away from the house. I fought her as hard as I could. I kicked, twisted, screamed, tried to dig my heels into the ground. But she kept dragging me. When we got in front of Mr. Alden's house, his front door flew open. He ran out, yelling at her to let me go. I remember him saying other words too, words I didn't understand, but his voice sounded huge, bigger than him, bigger than the whole street. The old woman let go. Then Mr. Alden picked me up and carried me back home. The next thing I remember, I woke up in my bed the next morning. For a little while, I convinced myself it had been a nightmare. My mom hadn't heard me scream. She hadn't heard the front door open. Nothing in the house looked different. But later that day, when I went outside, Mr. Alden called me over. He knelt down in front of me and said, "Don't ever open the door for someone you don't know. Not at night, not even if they call you by name." Then he put a hand on my shoulder and said, "But you don't have to be afraid. I'll look out for you." I hugged him and cried into his shirt. After that night, I never saw the old woman again. Not in reflections, not at the park, not across the street, not anywhere. Mr. Alden passed away a few years later. I still think about him more often than I can explain. And I still think about her too. Because whatever she was, she had followed me for years. And somehow, that old man made her stop. Back in 1996, I was about 2 years into some pretty intense training to become a massage therapist. I've always felt like I was born with healing hands, along with a few other gifts I didn't fully understand yet. But this world can be rough, you know? Gifts are beautiful, but they don't pay rent. I used to joke that having supernatural abilities and a few dollars in your pocket might get you a burger, but it wasn't exactly a retirement plan. Around that time, my close friend's family helped me get work as a repo man. We were picking up cars for the bank in the auto auction out in Norwalk, California. Now, Los Angeles has places that can make even tough men rethink their life choices. A lot of repo guys didn't want anything to do with certain neighborhoods. They'd hear Watts, Inglewood, South Central, Compton, and suddenly everybody had a dentist appointment. But I grew up around East LA, so I wasn't really scared of those places. To me, people are people. You show respect, you don't act like you're better than anybody, and you remember that even when you're there to take someone's car, you're still dealing with human beings. That attitude saved me more times than I can count. One afternoon, our crew leader, who also happened to be my best friend, sent us out to work those tougher areas. His name was Joey D. By the time 4 rolled around, we were done for the day, and we had our usual little routine. We'd relax, grab something good to eat, talk about life, and then find some quiet place to unwind. That day, Joey D said he wanted to head up to Crystal Lake in the San Gabriel Mountains. It took us close to an hour to get there. By the time we arrived, dusk was settling over everything, and the whole place had that strange, quiet feeling the mountains get when the sun slips away. We sat there for a while, talking about spiritual things, supernatural things, and the kind of mysteries people usually avoid unless they've lived through a few. At some point, I looked up toward the trees across the dry lake bed, just letting my mind wander, when I noticed one tree in particular. Something about it felt wrong. I had already been feeling strange that evening. There was this pressure in my chest, this anxiety that didn't feel like it belonged to me. I was keeping it together, but when I saw that tree, the feeling spiked hard. Joey D noticed right away. He looked at me and said, "What's wrong with you?" I couldn't answer him at first. I was staring at the top branches of that tree. They were crossed in this odd way, and then suddenly I got a picture in my mind. Clear as day, me walking across the dry lake bed toward it. I didn't think. I just stood up and started walking. By then it was dark, and the only real light we had was coming from the city far below. Halfway across the lake bed, I realized I had left Joey D sitting back there alone in the dark at creepy Crystal Lake. I turned around and saw him jogging after me. He caught up and said, "Bro, what are you doing?" And all I could say was, "I don't know, but I think that tree needs help." The closer we got, the calmer I felt. That anxiety started draining out of me, little by little, and by the time we reached the tree, it was gone. I stood there and told him, "I don't know how to explain this, but this tree was calling me." I had never experienced anything like that before. Luckily, when I first took off, Joey D had enough sense to go back to the car and grab a flashlight. Then another picture came into my mind. I saw myself digging near a boulder behind me, so I turned around and started digging. About 6 inches down, I hit something hard. It was the lid of a jar. I cleared the dirt away and realized the whole thing had been buried there. Joey D was silent. And if you knew him, you'd know silence was not his natural state. Inside the jar was this strange white and red substance, thick and sweet-looking, and there were objects sealed inside it. A pair of underwear, a lock of hair, a bracelet, 2 small school photos taped together, face to face. The moment I saw it, I knew exactly what it was. Something hot rose up in me. Not fear, not confusion, anger. I said, "No, I'm not allowing this." I smashed that jar against the boulder and pulled the pictures apart. Whoever had put that spell together knew what they were doing. It wasn't sloppy. It wasn't some childish little game. It had intention behind it. Then, just when I thought it was over, the anxiety came back. Softer this time, but clear. Another image came into my mind. The opposite side of the tree. So I walked over there and started digging again. And I found another jar. By now, I could feel Joey D's fear almost like it was inside my own stomach. So I told him, "Don't worry, we're the good guys." This second jar was different. It was filled with a thick, greasy substance, heavy and dark-looking. Inside, I could make out a school ID bracelet, a tooth, another lock of hair, and other things I didn't care to examine too closely. I looked at Joey D and said, "You see this? People are coming up here to do real dark work." Then I smashed that jar too. And just like that, everything lifted. No anxiety, no rage, no heaviness. I felt calm again, clear, almost peaceful. More than anything, I felt gratitude. Not from me exactly, but around me, through me, like the land itself had exhaled. That night changed something in me. I realized that, just like my ancestors, I could communicate with trees. Not in words, not the way we speak to each other, but through feeling, pressure, images, and knowing. That was nearly 30 years ago. These days, the trees still tell me things. Not usually with pictures anymore. It's more subtle now. But once you understand that negative energy affects everything, including the trees, you learn to pay attention. A tree can tell you a lot about a place. Before you buy land, before you move into a home, before you settle somewhere and call it yours, look at the trees. They know what's been there. And if you know how to listen, they'll tell you. I've shared this story a few times online, usually in places where people talk about strange experiences, but I've never actually told anyone face to face. Not once. I wouldn't call myself religious. I'm more in that agnostic space, where I don't really claim to know what's out there. But this is one of those memories that never settled down in my mind. It still sits there, quiet and sharp, like it's waiting for me to explain it. Back when I was in high school, there was this old performing arts building on campus. Everybody said it was haunted. Not just haunted in the usual cold spots and weird noises way either. The rumor was that something dark lived there. Some people called it a spirit. Some called it a demon. I heard about it during my first year, and apparently the stories had been around long before I ever walked through those doors. I didn't think much of it at first. Schools always have legends, right? Every campus has some creepy hallway or locked room that students turn into folklore. But then, during my second year, I had first period ceramics in that building. It was a huge place, much bigger inside than it looked from the outside. The hallways twisted around in strange ways, and if you didn't know where you were going, you could lose your sense of direction pretty fast. Early that year, a girl in my class, I'll call her Mara, asked to use the restroom. She was gone for maybe 5 minutes before she came bursting back into the room. She was sobbing. Not just crying, but full-on shaking, gasping, screaming so hard that nobody knew what to do. She kept saying there was something at the end of the hallway, something watching her. The way she said it made the room go silent. I know people exaggerate. I know teenagers can be dramatic, but this didn't feel like that. Her fear looked real in a way that made my stomach drop. She didn't come back to school for almost 2 weeks after that, and when she finally returned, she wouldn't talk about what happened. Her friends said she wasn't the same afterward. Quieter, nervous, like some part of her was still back in that hallway. About a month later, it was my turn. I left ceramics to use the bathroom, and honestly, I got lost. It was still early in the school year, and I hadn't really explored that building yet. I remember walking through those halls, trying to act calm, even though I had no idea where I was. Then I heard it. It came from behind me, close enough that my whole body reacted before my brain could. It was this awful, unnatural sound. Not exactly a scream, not exactly a growl. More like something trying to force a human voice through a throat that wasn't built for one. I didn't turn around. I just ran. I ducked into the nearest room, which happened to be a choir class. The teacher stopped mid-lesson and looked at me, and I was ready for her to be angry because I had just barged into her room like a lunatic. But she didn't look angry. She looked worried. And then she said, very softly, "You heard it, didn't you?" That scared me more than the sound. I told her what happened, and she walked me back to my ceramics classroom. The whole way there, she kept one hand wrapped around the cross necklace at her chest. She kept looking down the halls, left and right, like she expected something to step out from around a corner. That was the only thing I personally experienced in that building. But after that, I started paying more attention to the stories. The next year, one of my teachers told us she had stayed late after school grading papers. It was already dark when she left, and as she passed the performing arts building, she looked up and saw a figure standing in one of the upper windows. The strange part was that the window was near the top of the building, close to a ceiling that must have been 30 feet high. There shouldn't have been anyone standing there, not unless they were floating. People also talked a lot about the props room near the theater area. Students hated going in there alone. Teachers didn't like it either, though most of them wouldn't admit that directly. They'd just say things like, "Take someone with you," or Don't stay back there too long. There was even a story about a few students from another school sneaking into the building one night during a basketball game. Supposedly, one of them went into the props room and saw something that scared him so badly he wet himself. They found him later wandering near the gym, crying and trying to explain that there was some kind of creature in the theater wing. I know how all of this sounds. I know stories grow teeth the more people repeat them. I know fear can fill in the blanks. I know old buildings make strange sounds, and high school rumors can turn a shadow into a monster by lunchtime. But I also know what I heard. And I know the look on that choir teacher's face. So I still don't claim to know what was in that building. Maybe there's a normal explanation buried somewhere under all the panic and rumors. But every now and then, I think about that hallway. I think about the sound behind me. I think about how I ran without ever looking back. And honestly, part of me is glad I didn't. I've been a therapist for a little over 10 years, and I used to believe I understood distance. Not emotional coldness exactly, more like the careful space you keep between yourself and the person sitting across from you. The space that lets them feel safe enough to fall apart, while you stay steady enough to help them put the pieces somewhere they can bear to look at. That was always the work. At least, that's what I thought. I keep a clock on the wall behind the patient's chair. I started doing it during training, and I never stopped. People notice everything when they're in therapy. Your eyes, your mouth, the tiny change in your breathing when something lands harder than expected. So if I need to check the time, I look just past them. They don't feel watched. They don't feel rushed. And I get to feel, in some small way, in control. I haven't felt that way since late January. His name was listed as Damian March, 42 years old, self-referred. He had written that he was dealing with unresolved trauma and intrusive memories. That part was ordinary enough. I see people like that all the time. People who have spent half their lives locking doors inside themselves, only to realize the keys were never really gone. Damien was quiet at first, polite, careful. Not evasive, but guarded in the way people are when they have learned that honesty costs something. By our fourth session, I found myself looking forward to seeing him. He was thoughtful. He answered slowly, not because he was trying to sound clever, but because he seemed to be listening inwardly for the truest version of what he meant. There was something sad about him, but not dramatic. More like an old bruise under a sleeve. Our sessions were always on Thursdays, 5:30 to 6:30. Last appointment of the day. My receptionist, Clara, left at 6, so by the end it was usually just the two of us in the building. I've thought about that detail more than I'd like to admit. Everything changed in the 9th week. For 2 sessions before that, Damien had been circling something. I could feel it. Therapists get used to that change in the room, the way a person approaches something painful and then veers away at the last second. He mentioned his father, his sleep, a hallway he could picture but couldn't place. I didn't push. You don't push. You wait by the door until they're ready to open it. That Thursday, he came in, sat down, folded his hands in his lap, and said, "I think I'm ready to talk about the house." I told him he could take his time. He described a 2-story house on a quiet street, a pale cream exterior, the paint weathered gray around the windows, a front gate that never closed properly, a patchy garden with more moss than grass. And something in me went very still. Then he described the inside. A narrow hallway, a dark wooden banister, the 2nd and 5th stairs creaking under your weight, a kitchen that always smelled faintly sweet, Not like food, he said, but like cleaning liquid or flowers left too long in a warm room. My mother used lavender floor cleaner every Sunday morning. Every Sunday, from the time I was little until I left home. I didn't move. That is what training teaches you. You do not move when something inside you starts screaming. Damien went on. He described the upstairs landing, a linen cupboard on the left, a bathroom with a pull-cord light that only worked if you tugged it twice. Then, at the very end of the hall, a child's bedroom with one window facing the back garden. And wallpaper. White wallpaper with tiny blue sailboats. That was my bedroom. From the age of 7 until I was 15, when I finally begged my father enough times that he let me paint over it. My mouth went dry. I reached for my water glass, and for the first time in years, I noticed my hand shaking in front of a patient. Damien wasn't watching me. He was looking slightly past my shoulder, as if the memory was being projected onto the wall behind me. Then he mentioned the dog. A small, sandy terrier who slept at the foot of the bed. A dog who made a strange little grumbling sound whenever someone opened the front door. Not quite a bark, he said, more like a complaint. And then he said the dog's name. Marlowe. My dog's name was Marlowe. He died when I was 16. I have never told a patient about him. I have never written about him. There is no public record connecting that dog to me. No photograph online. No old post. Nothing. I ended the session early. I told Damien I wasn't feeling well, which was not exactly a lie. He looked concerned, but not surprised. He said he hoped I felt better, and then he left. Calmly. Normally. As though he had not just walked barefoot through the locked rooms of my childhood. I sat there for a long time after the door closed. Then I went to the filing cabinet and pulled out his folder. The intake form was blank. Not missing. Blank. The pages were there. The printed fields were there. Name, date of birth, address, emergency contact, medical history. But every line that should have been filled in was empty. Clean paper. I checked the appointment book. Thursday, 5:30. D. March. Written in Clara's blue pen. But there was no registration form, no consent form, no ID copy, nothing we are required to have before seeing a new patient. So I called Clara. I asked her what she remembered about booking Damien March. There was a pause. Then she said, "Who?" I described him. Early 40s, dark coat, always arrived exactly on time. Her silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she said gently, "Dr. Ellis, your last Thursday patient has been Mrs. Harrow for weeks. After she leaves, you stay in the office alone. I assumed you were catching up on notes." I have no memory of Mrs. Harrow. None. I went back through my case notes. There they were. 9 weeks of sessions with Damien March, all in my handwriting. Detailed, consistent, clinical observations, progress, resistance, the slow movement toward a central trauma. They looked real because they were real. I know what false notes look like. These weren't false. But underneath them, on the same pages, written in the same pen, was another set of notes. Another patient. A woman named Eliana. Initial session, dissociative episodes, fragmented memory, intrusive recollections she cannot identify as her own. Describes, in vivid detail, a childhood home with a narrow hallway, a lavender smell, a bedroom with blue sailboat wallpaper, and a small terrier named Marlowe. Same dates. Same appointment times. 5:30 to 6:30. Every Thursday. I read those pages again and again before I understood what I was seeing. Eliana wasn't my patient. Eliana was me. And the notes were in my handwriting because I had written them, but not from behind the desk. From the chair in front of it. I was never Damien's therapist. Not for those 9 weeks. I was sitting across from him, telling him about a house I thought I had forgotten, a dog I never speak of, wallpaper I painted over decades ago. And somewhere inside the fracture, my mind built a kinder version of it, a version where I was the one in control, where I had the pen, where I was safe on the correct side of the room. There is a therapist named Damian March. I found him. He's licensed. He's 42. His practice is 4 streets from mine. I have no memory of making an appointment with him. I have no memory of walking into his office. I have no memory of those 9 sessions except from the wrong side of the desk. I'm staying with my sister now. I told her my flat has a plumbing issue because it was easier than explaining that I no longer trust any room with 2 chairs in it. Last night, I woke up at 2 in the morning because the room smelled so strongly of lavender floor cleaner that I had to open the window. My sister only uses unscented products. She always has. I don't think the memories are coming back. I think they were placed back inside me. Or maybe they were never mine in the way I thought they were. I only know this. Whatever happened in that room over those 9 weeks, Damian knew where to look. He knew exactly which door to open. And when I checked my appointment book this morning, next Thursday was already marked. 5:30. D. March. In my handwriting. I've never been the kind of person who jumps straight to ghosts when something strange happens. I've always tried to explain things away first. Bad dream, half-awake brain, shadows playing tricks, anything reasonable. But there's one thing from my childhood that I've never been able to make sense of. I was about 9 when my mom moved me and my older brother into this small apartment on the edge of town. She was raising us by herself back then, and money was tight. So it was the kind of place you moved into because you had to, not because you wanted to. The complex was rough. There were police around all the time, and I remember there being a little security office near the front, because things happened there often enough to need one. I have a handful of strange memories from that apartment, but this one is the one that never really left me. That night started completely normal. I went to bed the way I always did. My bed faced my bedroom door, which I hated, but there wasn't really another way to set up the room. I was a nervous kid, scared of the dark, scared of noises, scared of being alone. I always slept curled up on my side with the door shut tight. But sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up lying flat on my back. That alone was strange for me. Then I looked toward the doorway. My door was wide open, and standing in the hallway, just outside my room, was a woman. I know this is going to sound like something out of a horror movie, but she was wearing a white dress. Not a plain one either. It looked old-fashioned, with lace on it, and she had this little veil tucked into her hair. But her face and skin were what I remember most. They had this cold, bluish color, almost gray in some places, like something that had been underwater too long. Her skin didn't look right. It looked wrong in a way I still don't know how to describe. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just stood there, looking straight at me. And the strangest part is, I wasn't scared. I should have been. I was scared of everything at that age. I didn't even like walking to the bathroom by myself at night. But lying there, looking at her, I didn't panic. I couldn't move. Or at least, I didn't try to move. But it didn't feel like I was fighting anything. It was quiet, almost calm. I remember watching her chest rise and fall like she was breathing. I knew I wasn't dreaming. I felt awake. My room looked exactly the way it always did at night. The hallway light was dim, and I could see her clearly enough that even now, years later, I can still picture the folds of the dress. After a while, I just closed my eyes, and somehow, I went back to sleep. The next morning, my bedroom door was closed again. I told my mom what I had seen, expecting her to laugh it off or tell me it was a dream. But she didn't laugh. She just looked at me in this strange, tight way, like she was trying not to react. Then she changed the subject. My brother was there too, but he didn't say a word. I didn't understand that at the time. I just figured nobody believed me. Years passed, and honestly, I didn't bring it up much. Then, when I was about 15, we were sitting at the table one night talking about old apartments we had lived in. I mentioned that woman in the hallway, just casually, like, "Remember when I said I saw that lady?" The whole room went quiet. My brother looked at my mom and said, "I think she can know now." That's when they told me what had really happened. My brother's room had been down the same hallway as mine. A night or two before I told them what I saw, he had woken up thirsty and gone to get a drink from the kitchen. When he stepped into the hallway, he saw a woman standing there. He described her the same way I did. The white lace dress, the little veil, the bluish skin. Only when he saw her, she wasn't looking at him. She was staring into my room. He got so scared that he turned around and went straight back to bed. The next morning, he told my mom, and she panicked. She told him not to say anything to me because she knew how anxious I already was, and she didn't want me to be too terrified to sleep alone. Then, later that same morning, I walked into the kitchen and told them I had seen her too. I hadn't known any of that. They had kept it from me for years. And then, not long ago, my sister brought up something I didn't remember at all. She said that when I was younger, a few years after we left that apartment, I used to talk in my sleep sometimes. One night, apparently, I was mumbling about a woman outside by the swings. A woman dressed in white. My sister told the story like it was funny, but all I could think about was the hallway. That dress, that face, the way she stood there breathing and watching me. Nothing like that has ever happened to me again. We moved out of that apartment not long after, and I've never seen her since. I still don't know what she was, but I know what I saw. I've always felt things a little too deeply. I don't really know how to hate people. I can get hurt. I can get quiet. I can pull away. But hate just never seemed to live in me. People have told me that being around me makes them feel calmer, happier even. Sometimes people who are carrying really heavy things, grief, depression, loneliness, will sit with me for a while and say they feel lighter afterward. And honestly, that makes me happy too. It feels like something good passes through me, even when I don't fully understand it. When I was little, I used to see things. I remember seeing my grandfather sitting in the bathroom, just perched there on the edge of the tub like it was the most normal thing in the world. Not doing anything strange, just sitting there quietly. But when I looked again, nobody was there. Another time, my mother drove past this old abandoned house, and I looked up at the second-floor window. There was a teenage girl standing there in a pale, lace-trimmed nightgown. She saw me looking and slowly pulled the curtain shut. I never forgot that. Even as a child, I always felt like I didn't completely belong. Not with my family, not at school, not even later as an adult. I could be in a room full of people and still feel like I had been placed in the wrong story. But I never felt alone. That's the strange part. I was actually a happy child. It felt like something was always nearby. Not hovering in a scary way, more like keeping me company from just beyond the edge of sight. When I was around 5 or 6, I fell into a flooded creek near our yard. The water was rough, and the current was much stronger than I was. I was just this tiny little kid being pulled away, soaked and terrified. But somehow I grabbed onto the edge of a storm drain. And then somehow, I was back on the bank. I still don't know how. I wasn't exhausted. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even hurt. I was just drenched from head to toe, and my biggest concern was that I had ruined the new pants my mother had just bought me. I remember going back inside, and when she called me to go somewhere with her, I told her I wanted to stay home. Later that year, around the anniversary of my grandfather's passing, we had set out food for him. I remember looking over and seeing one of the bowls start spinning slowly clockwise. Then another bowl started spinning. Then another. I called out, "Mama, look at this!" She came over and just stared at it. She tried to check for water underneath, maybe a tilt in the table, anything that made sense. But the bottoms of the bowls were dry. Nothing explained it. To this day, I still don't know why those bowls moved. When we eventually moved to California, I stopped seeing things so clearly. It was like a curtain had been pulled over that part of my life. But whatever had been with me, I don't think it left. When I was 14, I was hit by a truck while crossing the street. I blacked out, and I have no idea how long I was unconscious. When I woke up, there were strangers gathered around me, and my sister was there crying. The first thing I asked was, "Did we still go on the field trip?" We had gone to medieval times that day for school, and for some reason that was the first thought in my head. I saw my sister crying, and I tried to stand up right away. Everyone around me told me to sit back down, but I kept saying I was fine. At the doctor's office, they said they were surprised. After a hit like that, I should have been in much worse shape. But all I had was a fractured ankle. And I didn't feel pain. Years later, when I was 22, I was driving home after buying cleaning supplies when another car slammed into mine going incredibly fast. My car spun, hit a fire hydrant, and then crashed into a wall. Everything was blurred and loud, but I remember getting out of the car and shouting, "What the hell?" A nearby family came over with a warm towel and stayed with me until the police arrived. I still think about them sometimes because they didn't have to do that. That night, I walked home. I didn't even go to the hospital. I just went inside, lay down on my sister's beanbag, and fell asleep. Somehow, I only had a few bruises. For a long time, I didn't think too deeply about any of this. I just carried it with me like a box in the back of my mind. Then everything changed. In 2026, my brother came back into my life after saying he needed distance from me for a year. I respected that boundary, even though it hurt. But a few months later, he came to me when he was at his lowest. I thought he needed help. I thought, he's family. He's hurting. I can be there for him. But things turned ugly. We were both not in the clearest state of mind, and suddenly he started saying things that cut me in a way I can't really describe. He accused me of things that shook me down to the core. To have someone from your own family look at you like you're unsafe after you opened your home to help them heal, it broke something in me. I tried to calm everything down. Eventually, we both went to sleep, but as I walked to my room, I felt uneasy. Deeply uneasy. The next day, I tried to show him something, hoping things might feel normal again, but another argument started. He threatened to leave and blamed me for it. So I finally said, "Go. If you don't feel safe here, then leave." And he said he would, because of me. That moment hurt more than I can explain. I realized that to some people in my family, I was useful when they needed money, comfort, or rescuing, but I wasn't really seen. I had helped emotionally, financially, quietly, over and over, and still somehow I was the villain in their story. Then something strange happened. It felt like hands were placed gently but firmly on my shoulders. Not imaginary, not symbolic. I felt them. They held me steady, then guided me toward my room. After he left, I remember getting up to lock the door, and those same hands seemed to guide me back again. Then I slept for 3 days. I didn't eat. I didn't drink. But the whole time, I felt like I was being held by someone much larger than me. I felt a hand stroking my hair, almost hushing me, telling me without words to stay asleep and rest. I don't know whether I was dreaming or awake. It was somewhere in between. But I remember the feeling clearly. I was being comforted. When I finally woke up, I wasn't starving. I wasn't thirsty. I felt refreshed, like my body and soul had been rinsed clean. After that, the world felt different. When I went outside, I could feel vibrations everywhere. In the trees, in the birds, in insects, even in the grass. Everything had its own little hum, its own presence. It was beautiful, but also overwhelming. And I became more aware of what was with me. It felt like a guard standing behind me wherever I went, not controlling me, not frightening me, just there, present, watchful. When I went to a friend's house, I noticed the atmosphere felt heavy, stale, negative. It reminded me of the feeling I used to get as a child when I looked at old buildings or walked into antique shops. His living room and kitchen felt fine, but the hallway was different. I could not walk into it. I tried, but my whole body said no. Every cell in me rejected it. It felt like large hands were holding my shoulders again, keeping me from going forward. Then the heaviness in the hallway seemed to get pushed back, deeper and deeper, like whatever was with me was forcing it into a corner. Even my friend noticed the house felt lighter afterward, easier to breathe in. At another friend's house, the energy was completely different, busy, crowded, almost like a family reunion happening in the air. She had old newspaper clippings and family photos all over the walls, and the place felt full of memories. Whatever follows me seemed cautious there. I felt it close around me, almost like it had wrapped its arms around me while I walked. I'm not religious. I respect God, and I don't carry hatred toward the devil either. But churches have always affected me strangely. Whenever I get close to one, I get headaches. The closer I go, the worse they become, until I have to leave. That's part of why I don't know what this thing is. It doesn't feel like family, not in the ordinary blood-related way. It feels ancient, like something I've known longer than this life. Maybe through other lives, if that's real. It doesn't feel like a human spirit, but I don't know if it's an angel or a demon either. It has never felt malicious. It has never tormented me. It has only protected me. Every serious accident I've been in, every moment that should have ended badly, I survived with almost nothing. A fracture, a bruise, wet clothes, a shaken heart. And somehow, I know it's male. When I picture him, I picture a knight. Not shiny and perfect, but old, steady, and watchful. Something that stands between me and whatever might try to harm me. Even now, as I say all of this, I can feel him near me, guarding the room. The air feels clean and calm, almost humming. I think he's here to stay until I die. I just wish I knew what he was, so I could thank him properly. Maybe one day I'll find someone who can tell me. But even when I pass by psychic shops, I feel that same heavy, nauseating vibration, and I turn away. So for now, I just live with the mystery. And I hope, somehow, he knows I'm grateful. really sure where this story begins, because there wasn't one single moment where everything changed. It was more like a bunch of small things piling up quietly, until one day I finally had to admit that something was very wrong. I was about 9 or 10 when I first got interested in the paranormal. Most kids I knew were scared of ghosts, but I wasn't. I was curious. I used to sit alone and try to talk to relatives who had passed away. Grandparents, cousins, people I barely remembered. Looking back, I know that sounds strange, but at the time I thought I was just being imaginative. Not long after that, things started happening in our house. It wasn't an old mansion or anything dramatic like that. It was just a regular house, but it felt big to us. 3 bedrooms, a large garage, and a backyard that seemed huge when I was a kid. My bedroom was right in the middle of the house, with 2 doors across from each other. One door opened toward the kitchen and dining area. The other opened into the hallway. My parents' room was down one end of that hall, and my older brother's room was at the other. Mine was right between them. At first, it was only noises. Little sounds at night. Scraping. Soft footsteps. Sometimes it sounded like someone was dragging their feet across the floor just outside my room. During the day, nothing ever happened. That made it easier to pretend it was nothing. Then I started hearing laughter. That's when it stopped feeling harmless. It sounded like children laughing somewhere inside the house. Most of it was faint, almost far away, but there was one laugh I could always pick out. A little boy's laugh. I told my older brother about it, and he laughed at me. He said I was watching too many scary movies and trying to scare myself. But after a few weeks, he heard it too. One night, we were both awake in my room when we heard footsteps stop right outside the kitchen door. Then came that same laugh. My brother looked at me and went completely quiet. That was the first time I realized I probably wasn't imagining it. After that, things got worse. The doors in my room started opening by themselves. Not slowly, not from a draft. They would swing open all the way. One door would open, then close. Then the other door would open, like someone was passing through my room as if it belonged to them. That part bothered me more than anything. Whatever it was, it seemed comfortable there, like we were the ones intruding. This went on for years. Then one night, my brother, a friend of ours, and I decided to use a Ouija board. I know how bad that sounds now, but we weren't taking it seriously. We were joking, moving the piece ourselves, acting like idiots and pretending we were talking to something. We were sitting on the floor in my room with one small lamp on and a candle next to the board. Then everything went black. The power cut out completely. At the exact same second, the candle went out. None of us moved. The whole room went silent in a way I still remember. Then something slammed into my bedroom door so hard it sounded like the wood might split. My brother jumped up and shouted. Before either of us could do anything, our friend started screaming. Not yelling. Screaming like someone was hurting him. Then the lights came back on. The first thing I noticed was this sharp, metallic smell in the room. Then I looked at our friend. There was red liquid on him. Not enough to soak him, but enough that all 3 of us backed away immediately. There were no drinks in the room, no paint, nothing red anywhere near us. He panicked and locked himself in the bathroom. My brother looked completely drained. He kept saying he felt something rush past him right before the door was hit. We searched the room because whatever struck the door had sounded solid. That's when we found the planchette. It was lying near the bedroom door, all the way across the room. Nobody had touched it. A few minutes later, we went to check on our friend. The bathroom was empty. The window was open. He had climbed out. We searched outside for about 15 minutes before I found him near the back fence, curled up with his knees pulled to his chest, rocking back and forth. I asked if he was okay. He wouldn't look at me. He just kept shaking his head. He never came back to my house after that night. After the Ouija board incident, things seemed to calm down. At least, that's what I told myself. There was no more laughing, no doors opening, no footsteps outside my room. But the feeling never completely went away. You know that feeling when someone is standing behind you? It was like that, only heavier. Like something was watching and waiting for me to notice. A couple years later, we moved into another house. For a while, I convinced myself that everything from the old place had just been childhood fear. Then I started seeing movement again. Never straight on, always in the corner of my eye. I'd walk down the hallway and think someone moved behind me. Or I'd turn a corner and catch a dark shape slipping out of sight. Whenever I looked directly, there was nothing there. At first, I ignored it. Then I noticed a pattern. Right before I saw it, I'd get this pressure in my chest. A heavy feeling, like my body knew something was nearby before my mind caught up. I stopped sleeping well. There's one night I still think about all the time. I woke up suddenly around 2 or 3 in the morning. No dream, no noise. I just opened my eyes with this awful feeling that something was wrong. The room felt tense. That's the only word I have for it. My bedroom door was open just a few inches. I stared at it, trying to understand why I had woken up. Then I saw it. Something was looking at me through the crack in the door. At first, my brain couldn't make sense of it. I could only see part of a face, mostly the eyes. They weren't glowing. That would almost have been easier to explain. They looked almost normal, except they reflected the light the way an animal's eyes do in the dark. But these eyes were still, completely still, just watching me. I froze. It wasn't sleep paralysis. I could move. I was just terrified. After a few seconds, adrenaline hit me. I jumped out of bed and rushed toward the door because my first thought was that someone had broken into the house. As I got close, I saw it pull back into the darkness. I threw the door open. Nothing. The hallway was empty. No footsteps, no movement, just darkness. I checked every room in the house. Nobody was there. When I came back to my bedroom, I saw my closet door slowly opening by itself, inch by inch. The room was silent except for that soft creak. And inside the crack of the closet, I saw those same reflective eyes, watching me again. I turned the light on immediately. Nothing was there. No person, no animal, nothing. But I know what I saw. And the worst part wasn't even that it was there. It was how calm it seemed. It didn't look angry. It didn't look violent. It looked curious. Like it had been standing there for a long time, watching me sleep. After that, I stopped telling myself it was stress. Stress doesn't open doors. Stress doesn't stare back. For a while after that, things went quiet again. Then I brought it somewhere it had never been before. Someone else's house. That was when I realized it might not have been attached to a place. It might have been attached to me. A while after the closet incident, I went to my girlfriend's house for the first time. Usually she came over to mine, but that night we decided to hang out at her place. The second I stepped inside, that same feeling hit me. Heavy. Wrong. Like walking into a room just after an argument has ended. I stopped near the door because it caught me so off guard. My girlfriend asked what was wrong, and I just told her I felt weird. I didn't tell her the truth. I don't think I was ready to say it out loud. The night started normally. We listened to music in her room, talked, joked around, and had a couple drinks. Later, she said she was hungry, so we went to the kitchen and made something to eat. Nothing strange happened while we were out there. That's what made what happened next so hard to explain. About half an hour later, we went back to her room. Both of us stopped in the doorway. Her entertainment center had been turned completely around. The TV, the speakers, everything. Not knocked over, not broken. Turned around. Like someone had physically rotated the whole setup while we were gone. I tried to laugh because I didn't know what else to do, but inside, I already knew. That feeling in the room had gotten stronger. My girlfriend started asking me what was going on. She was scared, and I couldn't blame her. So I finally told someone the truth. I told her I thought something had been following me for years. The second I said it, the room felt colder. She wanted to leave, but we had both been drinking and couldn't drive anywhere. So we stayed. Eventually, we calmed down enough to try sleeping, but I don't think either of us really slept much. Sometime in the middle of the night, I got up to use the bathroom. Everything seemed normal. No noises, no movement, nothing. Then I walked back toward her room, and I froze. There was something standing beside the bed, tall, completely black. It was leaning over her while she slept, just staring down at her. I couldn't make out its face because the room was dark, but the shape was wrong. Too tall, too thin, almost like a person stretched out in a way a person should not be stretched. I stood there in the hallway, unable to move. Every part of me was telling me not to step closer. Then it slowly turned toward me, and I saw the eyes, those same reflective eyes, not glowing, just catching enough light to shine back at me. The second I recognized them, I rushed into the room and reached for the light switch. As soon as I moved, it moved too. Fast. Too fast. It folded down toward the bed and disappeared underneath it. I hit the lights. Nothing was there. My girlfriend woke up screaming because I had slammed into the wall trying to turn the light on. I checked under the bed. Nothing. No person. No animal. Nothing. But I know what I saw standing over her. And from the look on her face afterward, I knew I wasn't the only one who felt it in that room. She asked me one question before either of us said anything else. "Were those the eyes you told me about?" I couldn't answer her, because until that moment, some part of me still wondered if I was losing my mind. But now someone else had seen it too. I'm from India, from the beautiful hill state of Himachal Pradesh, and the story I'm about to share is something that happened to a friend of mine. His name was Sahir. Sahir was a taxi driver, so driving late at night wasn't unusual for him. He was used to those quiet mountain roads, the sharp turns, the darkness, the forests on both sides. For him, it was just part of the job. One night, one of his childhood friends was returning home from abroad. His village was the same as Sahir's, and he called Sahir earlier that day and said, "Brother, I'll reach the bus station in Mandi around midnight. Please come pick me up. At that hour, I won't get a bus or taxi to the village." Sahir agreed. So around 12 at night, he reached the bus station in Mandi, picked up his friend, and drove him back to their village, which was around 35 kilometers away. After dropping him home, Sahir stayed for a little while. They drank tea, talked about old days, and his friend told him stories from abroad. After some time, Sahir looked at the clock and said, "Brother, I should leave now. I have to be back in Mandi by morning. At 5 a.m., I have an important passenger to pick up." It was around 2 a.m. when he started driving back. Now, there was one stretch of road on the way to Mandi that people in our area always avoided at night. It was lonely, surrounded by thick trees and forest, with no houses nearby. Locals used to say strange things happened there after dark. Some people laughed it off, but most still avoided that road if they could. Sahir reached that very place about 15 or 20 minutes after leaving the village. And that's when he saw her. A woman was standing by the roadside, wearing traditional Himachali clothes. She was raising her hand, signaling him to stop. Sahir slowed down, confused. At first, he thought maybe she was in trouble. But then a thought came into his mind. What is a woman doing here alone at 2 in the morning, in the middle of this deserted road? Still, he stopped the car. He rolled down the window and asked, "Where do you need to go?" The woman said, "Please drop me a little ahead." My daughter is very sick at her in-laws' house, and I have to reach there tonight." Her voice was calm, too calm almost. Sahir opened the door, and she sat in the back seat. From that point onward, the car became completely silent. No radio, no conversation, nothing. Just the sound of the engine and the tires moving over the road. After a while, Sahir asked her, "Once I drop you, how will you go further? You won't find any vehicle at this hour." The woman simply replied, "I'll manage." That answer made him uneasy, but he didn't say anything more. A few kilometers later, she told him to stop. Sahir stopped the car, and she got out. He didn't wait. He just drove ahead. But about 2 kilometers later, when he reached a bend in the road, his blood turned cold. The same woman was standing there again. She was on the roadside, raising her hand, signaling him to stop. Sahir froze. He knew he had dropped her behind. He had driven straight ahead. There was no shortcut, no path, no way she could have reached that spot before him. This time, he didn't stop immediately. He slowed down just enough to look carefully. And then he saw her feet. They were turned backwards. Her hands looked strange too, with long, sharp nails that he hadn't noticed before. That was the moment Sahir understood that this was not an ordinary woman. In our region, people call such a spirit a chudale. He pressed the accelerator and drove away without stopping. But after another couple of kilometers, there she was again, standing ahead, waiting for him. Again, her hand rose in the darkness, asking him to stop. By now, Sahir was terrified. His whole body was shaking, but somehow he kept control of the steering wheel. He started praying quietly and drove as fast as he safely could through those mountain turns. Somehow, by God's grace, he reached Mandi City. The moment he parked his taxi at the taxi stand, everything inside him gave way. The fear, the shock, the pressure of what he had seen, it all hit him at once. He suffered a paralysis attack and collapsed forward onto the steering wheel. His head pressed against the horn, and the horn started blaring loudly in the silent early morning. People nearby woke up and came running, wondering who was honking like that at such an hour. When they reached the taxi, they found Sahir unconscious inside. They pulled him out and rushed him to the hospital. The next day, when he regained consciousness, the first thing he said was that he would never drive a taxi again at night. In fact, he decided to leave that work completely. 2 days later, after he had recovered a little, Sahir went to a local priest in the village and told him everything. The priest listened carefully and then said, "You should thank God that you came back alive. You were wearing Lord Shiva's Trishul locket around your neck, and you had a picture of Lord Krishna inside your car. That protection saved you. Otherwise, she would not have let you return." And Sahir truly believed that, because after that night, he never took that road in the dark again. I'm 28 now, and for the last few years, I've had sleep paralysis about once a year. The strange part is that it always seems to happen around the same season, almost close enough to feel deliberate. And it happened again tonight. The first time was when I was still living at home. I remember waking up to this dry, scratching sound near the corner of my bed, right where the wall met the floor. I couldn't move, not even a finger. I was lying there, completely trapped in my own body, and all I could feel was this awful fear filling the room. Then I saw something small and black crawl up onto my bed. It moved slowly, almost carefully, and then it climbed right onto my chest. The second I snapped out of it, I ran straight upstairs to my parents' room like I was a kid again. I didn't even think. I just ran. The next year, it happened at my boyfriend Eli's apartment. That time, I didn't see anything, but I heard scratching again. I also heard his dog whining from the other room, this sad, panicked crying that made my stomach twist. I I kept waking up, or thinking I was waking up, but I'd slip right back into it. The sounds kept getting worse every time I fell back under. When I finally got myself fully awake, I went to check on the dog. He was asleep, completely fine. That was when I learned that if you don't fully wake yourself up, like actually get out of bed and move around, you can fall right back into that state. Last year was the one that really stayed with me. I woke up unable to move, and there was a voice whispering right next to my ear. I couldn't understand the words, but it sounded close. Too close. My head was turned to the side, and I saw a face right beside mine. It kept shifting, flickering between something that looked almost demonic and something like a huge black dog. It changed so quickly that I could barely process what I was seeing. Then I felt myself being pulled out of bed. Not lifted, not pushed. Dragged. Diagonally, like something had hold of me and was trying to slide me away. When I finally snapped out of it, I was shaken in a way I hadn't been before. I'd heard things, I'd seen things, but I had never felt something physical like that. I looked it up afterward and found out that physical hallucinations can happen during sleep paralysis, which helped a little, but not enough to make it feel normal. And then, tonight happened. It was probably less than an hour ago. I had just fallen asleep when I woke up to tapping sounds coming from the floor in the corner of my room. At first, I didn't understand what was happening, so I just closed my eyes and tried to ignore it. Then I heard another noise, and when I opened my eyes, I saw the outline of a man standing in the corner. I didn't want to stare at him, but I couldn't tell if he was extremely tall or if he was hanging from the ceiling. His shape looked wrong in the dark. I closed my eyes again because I knew, deep down, what was happening. I couldn't move. When I opened them again, he was at the foot of my bed. I couldn't see his face clearly. He looked like someone from an old black and white detective movie, wearing a suit and a hat pulled low. His face was mostly hidden underneath it. Just this dark, faceless figure standing there. I closed my eyes again, and then I felt someone get into bed beside me. Not gently, more like they dropped into the mattress. I felt the bed shift. I felt breathing next to me. Then I felt hands on me, touching my chest and moving over my body. I was wearing a t-shirt and underwear, so even though it was over clothing in some places, it felt horribly real. Too real. I was frozen and terrified, and I couldn't make it stop. Then I thought I woke up. I got out of bed and ran toward the door, but I dropped my phone. I remember looking for it on the floor, finding it, turning it on, and seeing that the time started with a 3. I opened my bedroom door, and suddenly I was back in bed. Then it happened again. I got up, and this time there were these wispy white shapes blocking the way out, almost like smoke or thin fabric floating in the air. I pushed through them and made it to the door, and then I woke up in bed again. I don't understand that part. I was still physically frozen, but somehow I was also moving around in these loops. Maybe it was a dream mixing with the paralysis. Maybe my brain was trying to escape before my body could. I don't know. Thankfully, about 30 seconds later, Eli came home from work and walked into the room. That snapped me out of it for real. I got up immediately and walked around because I was scared I'd fall back into it. When I checked the time, it was 1:44 a.m., not 3-something like I thought I'd seen. I looked things up afterward, like I usually do, and I found some information about vestibular motor hallucinations happening during sleep paralysis. A lot of people described it as feeling like an out-of-body experience, but this didn't feel like that to me. It felt like a nightmare wearing the room as a mask. I don't usually remember my dreams, and I don't have nightmares often, but I have had a few where I'm trying to get out of bed or leave my room, and then I suddenly end up back in bed again, like I've been reset. This whole thing has left me feeling sick and unsettled. I keep wondering if anyone else has experienced something like this during sleep paralysis, especially the part where you think you're getting up and escaping, but you keep ending up back where you started. What scares me most is that every episode is different. Every year, it's something new. And somehow, every time feels worse than the last. The timing is what makes it feel almost ritualistic to me. I know sleep paralysis can explain a lot of it, and I'm trying to stay grounded in that. But it's happened in 3 different places now, and I can't help feeling like there's something more to it. I'll probably do some kind of protection work after this, more than just cleansing the space like I normally do. But honestly, right now, I just feel shaken. I'd really appreciate hearing from anyone who's been through something similar, or anyone who has thoughts on what might help. So this happened around last Christmas, and even now, I still think about it more than I probably should. I'm indigenous, mixed, but not Filipino. I do have a few close Filipino friends though, and when I told them what happened, they were almost completely convinced it was an aswang. It all started in late August of 2025. My brother's fiancée, Mara, had just told our family she was pregnant. It was a huge surprise because she had always been told she probably couldn't have kids. Everyone was happy, of course. I already had one little niece, and now there was going to be another baby in the family. But the thing is, she told us outside on our back deck. Our house is surrounded by trees. Not just a few trees either. There's thick forest around the back and sides of the property, the kind that feels quiet in a way that is not always peaceful. At the time, my cousin was staying with us, and we were sharing a room. One night, we were up late talking, the way you do when the house is dark and everyone else is asleep. I got thirsty, so I went out to the kitchen. Our kitchen has 2 windows by the sink that look out toward one side of the backyard. From those windows, you can also see part of the roof. I've always hated going into the kitchen or living room at night. I don't know why. It just has this heavy feeling after dark. But that night felt worse than usual. It felt like the air had gone still, like something was listening. I tried to ignore it. I poured myself a drink and made a small snack. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw something move outside. Something with wings landed on our roof. At first, my brain tried to make it into a bird. Maybe an owl. Maybe a hawk. Anything normal. But it was not normal. There was a tall lamppost farther out in a yard, so there was just enough light for me to see the shape of it. It had long wings, sharp-looking claws, and this awful, human-like head. It was big, much bigger than any bird I had ever seen around our home. I froze. I left my drink and food right there on the counter and ran back to the room. When I got inside, I started crying because I was so scared. I told my cousin what I saw, and I think she could tell I wasn't joking. Still, she tried to comfort me and said maybe I was exhausted. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But I knew what I saw. The next day, I told my Filipino friends. That was when they reminded me that I saw it after Mara had announced her pregnancy. They told me that, in their stories, aswangs often target pregnant women. They said some are believed to change into animals, including large birds, and that they're known for going after unborn babies. When they said that, my stomach dropped. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell my brother. I didn't tell Mara. I was afraid they would think I was being ridiculous, because it wasn't our culture or our family's belief system. So I kept it to myself, which I regret now. For months, I refused to go into the kitchen at night. I would only go during the day. After sunset, I avoided those windows completely. Then Christmas Eve came. My grandparents lived just one house down from us, so every year we spend part of Christmas Eve with them before going back up to our own house later in the evening. That night, I decided to walk back before everyone else. I was crossing the yard alone when I saw it again. That same winged creature flew over the backyard and landed on the roof. I screamed and ran straight for the front door. I got inside as fast as I could and called my mom. A few minutes later, everyone came home, and I told them I had seen something on the roof. I still couldn't bring myself to say what my Filipino friends had told me. I just said I saw something strange and that it scared me badly. That night, we prayed together for safety and protection. Later on, when it was getting closer to the baby's due date, we went to Mara's baby shower. She lived nearby, not super close, but still in a wooded area. While we were there, she casually mentioned that she had been hearing strange noises at night. She described it as yelling sometimes, and other times like an animal screeching in distress. She said she had just been ignoring it. I wanted so badly to say something. I really did. But I bit my tongue again. At one point, I walked past their bedroom. The door was open, and I noticed a black blanket on the bed. That caught my attention because one of my Filipino friends had mentioned that some pregnant women use black cloth or blankets as protection, almost like camouflage from an aswang. I don't know if Mara knew that. I don't know if it was just a coincidence. But in February, the baby was born safely. No complications. No strange ending. Just a healthy baby, thank God. And after that, I never saw that bird-like creature again. So yes, I truly believe something came around our house because of that pregnancy. I believe it was watching. I believe it was waiting. And I also believe that somehow, whether she knew it or not, Mara was protected. I honestly don't know what's been happening to me lately, and part of me is nervous to even say it out loud because I'm afraid people will hear it and think I've completely lost it. But all of this happened within the same year, and that's what made it so hard to brush off. The first thing was a dream. It felt unusually real, not like a normal blurry dream that disappears when you wake up. In it, my mom had bought my younger sister a very specific jacket. I could remember the color, the cut, even the little details on it. The strange thing was, my mom had never mentioned buying her a jacket. There were no plans, no conversation, nothing. Then the very next day, she came home with that exact jacket. Same style, same details. Everything. I remember just standing there, trying to act normal, but inside, I felt this cold little drop in my stomach. I didn't tell anyone because I didn't know how to explain it without sounding ridiculous. After that, it happened again. I dreamed about an old zoo in my country reopening. It had been closed for years, since around 2006, and I had never even been there before. I didn't think about that place. I didn't talk about it. It wasn't part of my life at all. But the next day, I heard people talking about how that same zoo was being renovated and planned to open again. And I know some people might say, maybe you heard something about it without realizing. But I really don't think so. I had no memory of seeing or hearing anything about it before that dream. Then there was the dream about my mom checking my phone. In the dream, she found something private I had been hiding from her. When I woke up, I had this very strong feeling that I needed to delete it. It wasn't just anxiety. It felt more direct than that, almost like a warning tapping on the inside of my chest. So I deleted everything. A few hours later, completely out of nowhere, my mom asked to check my phone. She had never done that before. Not once. That was the part that scared me. It wasn't a habit of hers. It wasn't something I had been expecting. It just happened, right after the dream. Then something happened while we were out at a mall. I was sitting in a cafe with my mom when one of our relatives, Mira, suddenly came into my mind. We weren't close, and I honestly had no reason to think about her, I mentioned it to my mom, just casually, and my mom told me Mira had moved to another city. A few minutes later, after we left the cafe, we ran right into her. Just like that. My mom and I both froze for a second because it was so strangely timed. I remember looking at her and realizing she was just as shocked as I was. But the things that scared me the most were the ones involving family. There was my mom's uncle, someone I had only seen maybe twice in my whole life. For some reason, he suddenly stayed in my mind for an entire week. I kept thinking about him over and over, and I couldn't understand why. He wasn't someone I normally thought about. He wasn't part of my daily life. Then we heard that he had passed away. He wasn't known to be seriously ill, at least not to us, and we almost never heard news about him. Ever since then, I've carried this weird guilt, even though I know logically I didn't cause anything and couldn't have changed anything. Still, the feeling sits there. A few months later, something similar happened again. My family is huge. I have so many uncles and aunts, probably close to 50 altogether. But one specific uncle, Rafi, suddenly stayed on my mind for no clear reason. Not the others, just him. The next day, we found out he had suffered a stroke. Before that, I had no idea he was sick or struggling with anything. Now I don't really know what to think anymore. Part of me wonders if these are just coincidences that happen too close together. Part of me wonders if it's intuition, or my brain noticing tiny details before I consciously understand them. And then part of me is scared it's something I can't explain at all. I'm not saying I know what it is. I just know it's been frightening to carry alone. Sometimes I feel scared of my own thoughts now. Like if someone suddenly comes to mind, I start worrying something bad is going to happen. And I hate that. I don't want to live afraid of my own mind. I just needed to tell someone. Keeping it all inside has started to feel heavier than the experiences themselves. Years ago, something happened to my family in Honduras that we still don't know how to explain. My great-aunt's house sat on a narrow road in a quiet little town, right between an old Catholic chapel and the cemetery. Back then, the power would often cut out late at night, so after midnight, the whole street could turn completely black. No porch lights, no cars passing, no people walking around. Just darkness. One night, sometime around 2 in the morning, everyone in the house woke up at almost the same time. At first, they heard footsteps. Not one person walking, but many. Slow steps, low voices, the sound of a group moving together down the road. My family said it started far away, near the chapel, and little by little it came closer. The strange thing was, it sounded exactly like a funeral procession. Quiet, heavy, organized, like people were walking with a coffin through the dark, heading toward the cemetery. Everyone inside the house heard it. Nobody had to ask if it was real, because they were all awake, all listening. Then they saw something even stranger. Mixed in with the procession, there was a car. But my family said it didn't move like a normal car. It didn't rumble down the road. It didn't shake or make engine noise. It seemed to drift forward, almost floating through the darkness. No bright headlights, no sound from the motor, just this slow movement passing with the crowd. My great-aunt Elena finally got brave enough to open the window just a tiny bit and look outside, and the moment she did, one woman in the procession stopped. She turned straight toward the house. That part always chills me, because my family said it was instant, like the woman had heard the window open even over all those footsteps. She walked directly toward Elena. The woman was dressed completely in black, with a dark veil covering her face. In her hand, she carried a lit candle. She raised it slightly and, in a calm voice, told my great-aunt to come with them. Not shouting, not begging, just telling her to join. Elena felt something inside her go cold. She knew, deep down, that she should not answer and should not keep looking. So she shut the window immediately. But before she closed it all the way, she noticed something about the candle. Inside the wax, there were little white pieces. She said they looked like fragments of bone. After that, nobody in the house opened another window. They just stayed still and listened while the footsteps, voices, and movement slowly continued down the road until everything faded away. By morning, the street looked completely ordinary. No candle wax, no footprints, no signs that a huge group of people had passed by in the middle of the night. That's the part my family has never been able to explain. Several people heard it. The house really was between a church and a cemetery. The woman reacted the second the window opened. And over the years, we've heard that similar stories exist in different parts of Latin America. Nighttime funeral processions, women dressed in black, spirits carrying candles, voices asking the living to come with them. Now we're trying to understand whether this connects to older folklore, religious stories, or local legends that have been passed down for generations in rural towns. We're especially interested in stories about ghostly processions, women in black veils, candles with strange objects inside them, spirits near churches or cemeteries, and accounts from places where the nights used to be truly dark. So if you've ever heard a story like this from your parents, grandparents, neighbors, or anyone in your family, I'd really love to hear it. Because this is one of those stories that sounds impossible, but everyone who was there remembered it the same way. I want to tell you about something that has stayed with me for most of my life. My grandfather served in Vietnam, and I don't think he ever really came back from it. Not completely. He brought the war home in ways none of us fully understood. Sometimes he would talk about it. Some stories were strange and funny in that dark way people use when they're trying to survive their own memories. Others were so painful that the room would go quiet and nobody knew what to say. After the war, he struggled badly. He didn't sleep much. He drank a lot. And from what I understand now, he was carrying trauma that never really loosened its grip on him. When I was young, I overheard him telling my mother and a few relatives about something that happened after he came home. Back then, I didn't understand what I was hearing. I almost wish I still didn't. He said one night he was sleeping in his mother's basement. His bed was pushed under a small window, right above the headboard. He had been drinking that evening, more than he should have, and he passed out hard. Sometime in the middle of the night, he woke up to tapping on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Then someone outside whispered, "Hey, Raj." Still half asleep, he opened the window a little and asked what the man wanted. The man said, "She got too drunk. I can't get her home by myself. Help me put her in the wagon." So my grandfather got dressed and went outside. He remembered a woman lying there, limp and quiet. He remembered helping lift her into one of those little red wagons kids pull around. And then, nothing. That was all he could remember. The next morning, he woke up with dried blood on his hands. At the time, he convinced himself it had to be something else. Maybe he had gotten into a fight while drunk. Maybe he had cut himself and forgotten. Maybe he broke something. He didn't let himself think too hard about it. But a few weeks later, everyone on the reservation found out a woman had been murdered. And the worst part was what came after. The man who killed her had apparently brought her body home and acted like she was still alive. He put her in bed. He talked to her. When people came by, he'd bring food into the room and tell them, calm as anything, She's sleeping in the back." For days, nobody knew. Eventually, someone felt something was wrong and went to check for themselves. That's when they found her. I never knew every detail. I only know the man went to prison, and my grandfather never wanted to talk about it much after that. He passed away a couple of years ago. Later in his life, he moved away from the reservation with a woman he met, so I didn't see him constantly growing up. But whenever I did see him, he always looked tired. Not just sleepy, but hollow. Like some part of him was still standing in a place the rest of us couldn't reach. Near the end, he barely spoke. The last time I saw him, he was sitting in a wheelchair, staring off into the distance. It felt like he was watching something nobody else could see. When I was growing up, I lived with my mother, my older siblings, and my little brother. After my parents separated, my mom worked all the time just to keep us going. For a while, we stayed in the basement of her aunt's house, the same basement my grandfather had slept in. Eventually, my mom saved enough money to buy us a mobile home. It wasn't fancy, but she worked so hard on it. She cleaned it, fixed it up, painted it, and made it feel like it belonged to us. At first, everything seemed fine. Then we started hearing things. Late at night, there would be footsteps outside. At first, my mom tried to brush it off, because people sometimes crossed through the field near our place as a shortcut. But then, the knocking started. It happened almost every night, usually after midnight, knocking on the windows. The strange thing was that our windows were high off the ground, too high for someone to easily reach. But the knocks always came from the top of the glass. Then came the footsteps on the roof. Slow, heavy, back and forth. I remember one night my mom finally went outside to look. I could tell she was scared, even though she tried not to show it. There was nobody there. After that, none of us wanted to be in that house at night. But we didn't have anywhere else to go. Then, whatever it was seemed to move inside. Things would crash in empty rooms. Footsteps would creep down the hallway when everyone was supposed to be asleep. Sometimes we heard whispers, low and faint, almost like voices, but not quite human enough to make sense. My mother raised us Catholic, so she eventually called a priest to bless the home. I remember him walking through each room with holy water, praying while the whole house felt unnaturally still. After that, things stopped for a little while, but when it came back, it felt worse. It started happening during the day. After school, my siblings and I would be home alone for an hour or two while my mom was still at work. We'd sit in the living room with the TV on, pretending everything was normal, while loud crashes came from the back rooms. None of us ever went to check. We already knew we wouldn't like what we found. Then one night, I saw it. I woke up after midnight to whispering. There was moonlight coming through the blinds, laying pale stripes across the room. My little brother was asleep beside me. That's when I noticed something moving in the corner. A hand slowly reached out of the darkness. It pointed straight at my brother. Then the figure leaned forward, just enough for me to see its face. Its skin was pale. Its smile was too wide. Its eyes looked empty, but somehow bright at the same time. I screamed. My siblings woke up and my mom came running in. After that, we were finished pretending we could live with it. In our culture, there are spiritual people who are called when something from the other side needs to be dealt with. My mother contacted one of them. When he came into the house, I remember the whole feeling of the place changing. He wasn't afraid. He was calm, steady, almost like the house had been waiting for someone who knew how to speak to what was there. I didn't watch everything he did, out of respect, but afterward, I overheard him talking to my mother about the murder from years before. The man responsible had once lived on the same land where our trailer now stood. After the cleansing, the house changed. It became quiet. Not the heavy kind of quiet we had gotten used to, but a peaceful one. For the first time since we moved in, it felt warm. It felt safe. It felt like home. We moved away years later, but I still think about that place. I think about the tapping on the windows, the footsteps crossing the roof, the whispers in the hallway, and that pale face smiling from the shadows beside my little brother's bed. Even now, part of me still wonders if whatever was there ever truly left.